Good evening. Planning Board is now in session. First item on the agenda is a public hearing, Chestnut Meadow, 0 Chestnut Hill Road. This is a continued public hearing. It's been continued since May 1st, May 15th, June 5th, June 26th, July 17th, August 21st, and September 25th. I'll turn it over to the town planner to give us an update on where we are tonight. Karina.
Okay, since the last planning board meeting on September 25th, Open Space Preservation Commission had a meeting to discuss open space for the project on September 26th. On October 5th, Cornerstone made a updated submission, which was forwarded to Fuss and O'Neill, and pending review comments for that last submission. And that brings us to this evening. We have review comments back from the Department of Public Works. The project is continued on conservation agenda for October 26th. We are awaiting any Open Space Preservation Commission comments from their September 26th meeting. And that's about it. Brings us to today.
Hey, good evening. My name is George.
Hold on one second, George, please. Mr. Mills.
Mr. Chairman, as you recall, because of the Mullins rule and a number of meetings I've missed on this topic, I am recusing myself from this discussion and vote. George, if it's okay, is it all right if I still sit up here?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
George, good evening.
Go. My name is George Connors. I'm an engineer with Cornerstone. I'm an attorney representing Mr. Wheeler from Habitat, who's here tonight with me at the round table. As stated, we did meet with Open Space, I think the next night or within a couple of days. I have not received any letter, but basically what we've done is we've identified, let me see if I can use this, that lot there, 5, and lot 6, to be the 81U lots. They comprise the necessary acreage outside of wetlands and easements for compliance with the 10%. Those lots would be held for a period of 3 years and then would be eligible to be built on. In addition, we did not take off the periphery open space. You guys can tell us whether to take it off on a plan that you either approve or deny. I just didn't know whether to do that. So both options, both A and B under your bylaw, are on the plan, and you can choose that. Additionally, there was some letter from Mr. Colonna that indicated that he was adding in rain gardens and rain barrels. If you look at sheet number 2 of 6, and it's not on that, yeah, it is on that plan. Yeah, I can't see very well, but right in there, there's a rain garden, and right down there, there's a rain garden, and he's added some calculations in on that determine the volumes of water that they will infiltrate, 275 and 290 cubic feet in the design storms. And on the sheet in the back set of the plans, there is a detail of the construction of a rain garden. And that will be found in the lower right-hand corner on sheet 6 of 6. Additionally, there was an email from DPW sometime during Thursday of last week. I was away, and I got it this morning when I got in. Relative to some landscaping, I've authored a letter that indicates that we believe we comply with the recommendations or questions. There was one that dealt with the use of Acer rubrum, red maple. However, that's listed in your guidelines, which I think are about 50 or 60 pages long, for acceptable trees. We have also indicated on the plans, there was some question with respect to the design of the reconstruction and widening of Chestnut Hill Road for that last leg. We have separate plans for roadway intersection improvements on our set of plans. They're not part of this, as we've all discussed. So at some point in time, the selectmen will be given those plans that we're working on now, along with the traffic improvements and traffic controls during construction, and they would be the ones to approve it. So your approval, if there was an approval on this, would be conditional on the selectmen approving the access in or some sort of a funding mechanism to repair any damage that may be to the first leg of Chestnut from Route 30 into the site. There were some questions about the replacement of a type of tree in the island, which is a very small width island at the very beginning. The landscape architect had chosen dogwood. In your listing of approvable trees are crab apples and things like that, but the decision was to not use those because the crab apples fall in the road and deal with slippery conditions and unsightly conditions. Finally, there was a indication on the stormwater system and how the plants would be in proximity to pipelines and utilities. If you look at the drawing at the very end, it's not that one there, but let me go to. But at the end of the cul-de-sac, there's a drainage easement that goes down the lot line. I don't know, does this point to that? There you are. Those trees are each outside of the easement. And then at the area in the front where there's some pipes crossing the road, those particular pipes are generally deep enough for the root system. And when they do plant, that's a 40-scale plan. When they do plant them, they're not going to put them in front of inlets or anything like that. So we suggest that we've answered those questions and concerns with respect to placement of trees in the areas where utilities will be. The water pipe runs down the first leg of the road in the pavement, so that wouldn't be an issue. And then, of course, the utilities are going to run down, and they're going to be outside of that area that would be impacted by those particular plantings. So I can respond to questions and comments and suggestions at this particular point in time.
Thank you. Mr. Jenks?
Good evening, George. You've done a calculation, I think it was in connection with lots 5 and 6 and the addition of the rain gardens. Calculation I'm not familiar with, and I wonder if you could just help me. You took the square footage, multiplied that by an inch, and then divided by a foot to come up with cubic feet. Is that a, I'm just not familiar with that. Is that a common way of converting, or I guess you're not converting, you're getting from square footage to cubic?
Yes, we are. We have 3,000 square feet, and 1 inch is really 1/12 of a foot.
Right.
So 1/12 of a foot times 3,000 square feet is cubic feet.
So, but that's kind of an imaginary inch, isn't it, or a
No, it's a required
hypothetical?
inch. Under the stormwater guidelines that DEP has adopted based on Thomas Schuler's work, which is referenced throughout the DEP regulations. 92% of the storms that occur in this area are generally less than an inch of rain. There's about 46 inches of rain a year, pretty evenly distributed by 12 months, over 12 months of precipitation. So if you get 92% of the rainfall into the ground, then you do what the stormwater regulations are designed to do, is recharge the groundwater so that streams and lakes don't look dry in August and September. The Ipswich River was one of them, and several rivers down in the Washington, Virginia, Maryland area where Schuler did his studies for that. DEP has adopted, in total, Schuler's book back in 88, I believe, 85 or 88.
Okay, so that's in the regulations, that methodology.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I haven't run into that, wasn't aware of it.
You'd only run into it for infiltrating that amount of water based on soil type. And it would be different than an inch for soil types, as A, B, C, and D. A is sand, D is clay, and something in the middle is B and C. So depending on the ability of the soil to accept water, then you wouldn't use the full inch. You'd use a fraction of it, because you can't get enough water into clay at a regular basis.
Okay. And you have concluded that the total site encompasses the intent of the LID regulation, that no runoff, no rainwater is going to leave the site. Is that correct?
Yes, the purpose is quality and quantity. There is absolutely no runoff from this site to adjacent waters. It all goes in the ground currently and when we're finished.
Okay. There was a question of whether a waiver from the LID regulations is required or advisable. Where are we on that?
Mr. Colonna sent a letter on October 4th, and at the second page of that letter is a list of requested waiver considerations to the planning board, which he encompassed all those, but has added in two components, rain barrels, which are noted on the plan, I think on sheet 3 of 6 in the box. There's two notes, number 5 and number 6, and the rain gardens in the back of these two lots to collect water.
Okay. No more questions?
Thank you. Mr. Stein?
Nothing at the moment. I might have something later in the hearing.
Good evening. Thank you for the rain gardens, rain barrels, and the permeable pavement.
Oh, I forgot to
Appreciate
mention
that.
Sorry. Did I mention that? Permeable pavement? I forgot to mention that, I'm sorry.
I mentioned it for you. Thank you.
As long as you've mentioned it, where is it?
Where is what?
The permeable pavement?
It's walkways
Um,
on the site for the
yeah.
individual houses.
Walkways, patios, during lot development shall incorporate permeable pavement. Although the red maple is in the list of trees, that is from our bylaw, which was written, I don't know, back in 1986. And the DPW commented on that because it hosts longhorn beetles, which is a really fairly recent problem, which is devastating. So I would suggest maybe another species could be explored.
You suggested, we'll change it to that. I thought that the red maples had a very vivid and colorful component to the fall foliage on that particular road, and that was we thought an important aspect. I know that the longhorn beetle is being taken care of in the area, and there's some success on that, so we're amenable to a specific change for those trees or not.
Well, I know, they've had some success, but they've had to remove lots and lots of trees. It's devastating when they're found.
Yes. We have, out of some 80, I forget what the number was. We have 16 of those out of 16, 32, 48, 48, 51, 55. We have 16 out of 60 as trees. In shrubs, adding in shrubs is 29, 37. The shrubs are not really shrubs, they're more like tall trees. So between 60 and 39, 99 plants, 16 of them are the red maples. You make a suggestion, we're more than amenable to changing that to a different tree. In the list, there's plane tree, there's green ash, but ash now has a borer. You have the Gladetsia triacanthos, which is a honey locust. You've got the sweet gum tree. I wouldn't recommend that. The London plane tree, I think we have that. No, we don't.
I'm not at the level of expertise to recommend a tree, but I just would concur with the advice from someone who knows more than I on the red maple.
The best plant in that list that's left, there's only really 9 of them that you identify, one of which is the red maple. Of the 9 remaining, the London plane tree is probably the most appropriate for that particular site. Because everything else we have, and I don't think you want the ash now that it has a borer that's been identified.
Okay.
So we changed the red oak, I'm sorry, the red maple to London plane tree. If that's acceptable?
Is the London tree a hardwood?
Yes, it is.
Is hickory on that list?
No, it's not.
And no oaks?
We have oaks. We already have oaks.
I'm just not familiar with that London tree.
It is a street tree that's used quite a bit. Roundish at the top. Has a lot of characteristics of the red maple. And it's on your list. You've got 9 plants. Removing the oak, I'm sorry, the red maple leaves you 8. Would you like to see the list?
I'm fine, George, if the
Okay.
board wants to speak to this, or are we happy with the London tree?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you for suggesting that. Mrs. Luttrell?
My opinion on the open space would to go with lots 5 and 6 to remain undisturbed for 3 years from the date that the plan is endorsed and recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and to remove those small strips on lot 1 and 2 from open space. They're just an enforcement nightmare.
The rest of it would stay on 3 through 12?
Yeah, some of it is
That's fine.
part of the Concom, yeah.
Okay.
And that's all I have, thank you.
George, you're still open with conservation, correct?
Only because this hasn't closed.
I went over this with the town planner this afternoon. Karina, do you, there was an issue with a four-bay.
There was an issue with the four-bay from Fuss, is it Fuss and O'Neill? Who's your consultant?
That's, yes.
I get them mixed up from town to town. But we've addressed that, as I understood, from Mr. Colonna back quite some time ago. I think the four-bay, they were asking that it not be in the detention basin, but a four-bay by definition is in the detention basin. There's a slight berm separating it from the detention basin or the wetland basin or whatever the basin is below it, and they're different types. Only to capture sediment and let the small particles of sediment fall out in those small storms that are just over an inch. It's separated, but inside, that's the way they've been designed in this town for a long time. They meet DEP requirements, they meet all of that.
It was just a recommendation.
So, did conservation say that they were waiting for us to approve the plan, the rest of the plan?
My understanding from Mr. Colonna this morning was that, yes, conservation is waiting to close based on your final decisions.
See, we're waiting for them to close
Well,
before.
I'm sure you are. I've been down this road in many towns.
Let's see if
Well, we even discussed, ways to, that we've done it in the past, where if it's down to a small revision to the plan, that would be captured during a 20-day appeal period, which we've done in the past many times. But based on what you're saying, that the plan that you brought here tonight, that Fuss and O'Neill has reviewed, is the final plan.
It's the final plan pending your approval, which will be for that, a couple of changes we've talked about, and whatever else you come up with for your conditional approval. Yes. So there'll be a revision date, one more, at some time subsequent to now, with all your conditions.
So, Vito submitted his letter with the calculations that Mr. Jenks went over, and then attached was that list of requested waiver considerations to the planning board, and there's 3 of them listed. You have that in front of you?
I have it here. I do.
The first one, clustering of buildings. And I think we're way beyond that. We've been talking about this conventional as-of-right subdivision layout for 6 months or more. So, is it your opinion that we have to waive the clustering?
No, it's not my opinion you have to waive anything, because your lid regulations are performance standard based, not command and control. We had this discussion last week. The lids are, as I said, to take care of regional groundwater quality and quantity. And we do that. The stormwater regulations of DEP and your Conservation Commission, I think they are in charge of that, deal with all of those things. Lids are like a separate little thing that exists out there that you can import into the plan to get credit, so that you don't need all your drainage mitigation. Minimal amounts. It only would reduce something like 10 or 15% of your rate of runoff or your water quality treatment. It's insignificant, and we don't go looking for that under the general lid requirements of the EPA. So, in terms of what lid is supposed to do, I think we meet it, but we've had this discussion a couple times now.
I'm just, again, I think I stated this at the last meeting, that I'm concerned about waiving something that doesn't need to be waived. And I don't want to start waiving, I don't want the planning board to start waiving lid requirements. I know another board has done that, but I don't want the planning board to start waiving these. Start waiving them for you, then the next guy comes along and wants more waived. The next thing you know, it's a free-for-all. So if something needs to be waived, then we'll consider it. But in looking at this first one, I just don't see that, since you have a choice, and it complies with one of the choices, there's nothing to waive. In the second one, where you're talking about the roof gardens, I think the roof gardens apply more to different types of roofs other than
Correct.
residential pitched roofs.
Correct.
So again, why would the planning board be waiving something that doesn't apply to this project?
Well, may I read the second paragraph of the purpose and authority?
Yeah.
You're right. Environmental protection is a significant concern to the town of Southborough. It is a public interest to minimize the impacts associated with land development and regulate post-development stormwater runoff discharges to control and minimize increases in stormwater runoff rates and volumes, post-construction soil erosion and sedimentation, stream channel erosion, non-point source pollution associated with post-development stormwater runoff. LIDs, site planning and management of post-development stormwater runoff, will minimize damage to public and private property and infrastructure, safeguard the public health, safety, environment, and general welfare of the public, protect water and aquatic resources, and promote groundwater recharge to protect surface groundwater and drinking water supplies. So if you're trying to achieve that, then what you do is you deal with the stormwater so you don't have much runoff and you clean it up. Then there's 6 items beyond that paragraph enumerated. The purpose of the bylaw is protect quality and quantity, protect existing topography, natural hydrologic characteristics, siltation on point, source pollution, and protect the integrity of the watersheds, and minimize the amount of disturbance of the land. So this plan does all that, but the big focus is to keep the existing hydrologic conditions the same, pre and post. And this project does that, partially because it's sand and gravel, partially because it didn't discharge anything off in the existing condition. It had a little puddle in the front that everybody knows about. So we don't drop one drop of water off this site. And I would suggest that we meet the purpose of the bylaw.
So I'll ask, maybe I'll, thank you, I'll ask the board then if they agree with me that you've complied and there's nothing to waive. Mr. Jenks?
That's up to you.
I agree with that. I would suggest a finding that it meets the intent of the LID regulation,
And put that in the record.
and put that on the record.
Mr. Stein?
I guess I'd just ask the proponent, maybe you can help me understand why you're seeking the waiver. What is it you need what needs to be waived?
As Mr.
How do you not meet the lid? Let me put it that way.
We have 2 or 3 components that we don't have in the site design. One is roof gardens. We have pitched roofs, asphalt roofs. So you wouldn't have a roof garden in that instance. On a flat roof, on an industrial building or commercial building, you might. A lot of them in Boston, probably in Newton too. We didn't have the rain gardens, which are small little depressions that rain will go into in yards.
But you do now.
We do now, we have, yeah. And we didn't have rain barrels. I don't know if anybody would want a rain barrel on
Okay.
$1.5 million house, but we've put on the plan that they're in there. Then there's the clustering of buildings. This is an as-of-right subdivision. And as Ms. Luttrell noted, about the Beatles, the lids came in well after the subdivision control law had so.
I think based on all of that, I'm in agreement with Mr. Jenks and Mr. Morris that I would just, say you meet the lid.
Thank you.
Mrs. Luttrell.
This is where I'm coming from. The bylaw says, to obtain approval, the applicant shall submit a lid special permit application that meets the lid site design principles stated below. And below, one of those things is clustering of buildings. The other is the rain gardens, buffer strips, rain barrels, et cetera, et cetera. Then the following paragraph says, the planning board may waive some of the requirements of the lid special permit application if it determines that some of the application requirements are unnecessary. So my reading is that the application should include these things, and if not, if they're unnecessary or don't fit the site, like clustering of buildings, they should be waived. The roof gardens, I don't think they need to be waived because it says use of roof gardens where applicable, and they're not applicable here. But the other things, it doesn't say that.
You feel that we actually would be doing the code more of a service by sticking to the letter of the regulation and waiving those, as de minimis as they are, those little components.
Correct. I think we would be following the bylaw.
Okay, that makes sense to me too then.
Mr. Jenks.
I think if we find the project is in compliance with the lead paragraph that then subdivides into the 8 requirements, that should suffice. I would ask the applicant if he has a preference.
Which I think he just did through the chair.
Thank you.
I agree that a waiver would not be required. And when I had written a memo on September 14th with respect to the waiver, the last couple of pages of that, I indicated some language taken right from the bylaw. It says the town's general preference is that stormwater be conveyed and treated in natural and vegetated systems, such as, and I highlighted such as, and the basic premise of the lid is to establish tools, techniques, and protocols for on-site storage and minimize and maximize opportunities for infiltration. That's all I have to say. What you choose to waive or choose not to deal with as a waiver is up to you at this stage. You are the board. You are the authority.
Mr. Chairman, I could go either way with it. We could do specific waivers or find that the project as defined meets the intent of the LID requirements.
So if we were to actually grant a waiver or waivers, it would seem that the only waiver that would have to be officially granted would be the clustering.
And roof gardens.
Not the roof garden, not the roof gardens, and, because that's as applicable.
Okay.
And on pitched roofs, it's not applicable.
Right.
And what's the last one?
The last one has to do with wastewater plans, but reading the text here, it's captured with the proponents' data and work with the Board of Health relative to soils perking and the distances and so on.
There was a plan that showed those separation radii and distances for wells and all, but the wells are now abandoned in favor of water system connection.
So if, so this might be the point where somebody makes a motion to waive the clustering of buildings, even though I believe that several months ago, as this plan evolved, we essentially did that. Because if this vote doesn't carry, George, you're back to a cluster design.
I don't think so.
Mrs. Luttrell, Mr. Jenks.
I move we waive the clustering of buildings under lid 174-13-32C.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, 4-0. You have been granted that waiver.
Thank you.
So is the board ready to vote on the plan as we discussed it with the proposed minor revisions that Mr. Connors?
Just procedurally, there is a revision date. Are we in a position now to close the public hearing and vote? So if after that there is a revision to the plan, will that come back before us for review? How does that work?
Go ahead, George.
You will vote various conditions, and then we will change the plan. This is typically what happens. There are several conditions, for example, lot numbering or house numbering, things of that nature that come later, and whatever it is you choose.
Changing the species of a tree.
Exactly. So you'll list those conditions, and then we will change the plan with a final date incorporating those conditions sent to you to make sure, and we put a little circle in red around it so your planner can ensure that we've met those conditions, and then the plan would be eligible for endorsement.
Do we have a list of all those conditions?
Not yet, not compiled.
Hard to vote approval subject to the conditions if we don't have a list.
Could be a problem. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Freddie Gillespie, the Chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission, and we did meet with the applicant and his attorney at an Open Space Commission meeting, and we didn't get a letter into you, so I thought I would just, my time got tied up with the right of first refusal on another project. So we had a very productive meeting, and what you're seeing the results of that here. The two lots that they proposed were acceptable. We did have a concern over when they're building the road, they won't be publicly available as a park, and we were assured that would be a short period of time, but the planning board may wish to consider that in your decision, how long that goes on, that it's not accessible. They were going to put a berm or something to make it, because there would be a grade change, I believe, between the road and the land. There was that, and that the land would have, the two lots would have like fencing around them to identify where the land was when construction was going on the adjacent properties. But overall, we were very happy with this result. The other thing we did recommend, we did not want those 10-foot strips to stay on the plan. We felt they were burdensome to the town and to future property owners, that they can't, we know they're not enforceable, which is why we went with this first time we've ever made this kind of a recommendation because of the 10-foot strips. So, and we'll be writing a letter for the records stating what I'm saying here, just because it is so out of the realm of what we ever have recommended in the past. We would like that included.
Just a quick question. Are you talking about lots 3 through all of them, in other words? Or?
We
because-
don't care about the other ones that are under the conservation restriction, or not restriction, but the conservation requirements, but the 10-foot narrow strips on the lots that don't have a sorry, I don't have my notes.
1 and 2?
What Mrs. Luttrell identified in her comments, that was our opinion. The other question I just had, which is, if I can just ask a question, it's not an open space commission, but as a, you were discussing the tree planting, and I didn't see a landscape plan for the rain gardens or the swale, and maybe that's here and I just didn't see it, but if there's a potential, because I think the rain gardens aren't going to be built until after the park is done, at least on that lot, that there's time to take some input on suggested plants, if they would be willing to do so. Not a requirement, but there are some plants that are being advised for some of our declining species of native bees. We're doing a research project here in town, and we have some species that we have new information. So specifically good for land that gets flooded with a rain garden. So that was just a request in the future. We could offer a suggestion. And then for the swales, is that just going to be turf grass? Because there's other better alternatives maybe with native.
No, typically there are, from a nursery out in Amherst, conservation-type seed mixes, and we've indicated on the plan various types of seed mix for the appropriate swale, for its resistance to velocity plants and things like that. For example, the rain gardens are using what's called a rain garden wildflower mix available from that nursery.
Is that New England wetland plants?
Yeah.
Okay.
exact- yeah.
There just might be an additional one we might ask you to add in.
Well, we
With
can
new
get some
information.
seeds and add it to that mix. It comes with a bunch of types of grasses and wildflowers, and you just get some extra seeds for whatever. We've done that.
I apologize, I didn't see that. That sounds really good. So just I wanted to be on record, aside from removing those narrow strips, we were very happy with this, this plan, and thank you.
I guess we're at the point of opening it up to the public. Any questions or comments? George, I think the best way to do this is to have the list of conditions typed. We would do that, submit it to you. You and Vito could look it over. We'd, and then have that ready for our next meeting. Hopefully it would be, all of this detailed stuff would be behind us, and we would just focus on the motion and make sure that we were in agreement relative to the plans and the conditions. So our next meeting is October 30th. I don't know how that works for you. If Conservation is waiting for us, they meet on the 26th. So I don't know if the board would want to meet between now and the 26th, or if we were to have part of our always continuous communication with the Conservation Commission and let them know that we're fine. We'd even put that in writing, that we intend to have a meeting on October 30th, during which the conditions, and then by October 26th, we would certainly have the conditions ready for Conservation to review and the plans, and that it would be our intention to take a vote based on all of that written information. Does that work for you?
We have 4 members that night.
October 30th? Is that okay?
We have 4 members.
I guess part of this might be on me because for some reason I was under the impression that the plan may change or was going to change based on that swale comment,
Forbay?
the four-bay thing. And normally we don't vote on a plan until, all the details are on it. So that's, I guess, one of the reasons why we're not fully prepared with a list of conditions tonight. But appreciate you being willing to come back on the 30th, at which time we hopefully can get to a vote.
So you'll create this list of conditions.
Submit it to
I'll
you.
have it within a week.
Yep.
Tonight's the 16th, so 14 days, okay. And, all right, and then we'll get it back to you 2 days later.
Right, because some of the conditions, I'm sure that all the conditions will agree to. Maybe we missed a couple, and maybe you may want to reword them
Yes.
to make an
you.
improvement. And we try to do that so that everyone's comfortable with the language.
Perfect.
So that means, we just happen to have an extension form here.
You do? I'm surprised.
We always have one of these. So this would, at least it's all filled out. This would extend, the public hearing would be continued to October 30th at 7 PM, and the period of approval would be extended to November 3rd, close of business. It's always a few days after in case we have a snowstorm or something like that. So, first thing we would need before we can continue the public hearing would be a motion to extend the approval period to November 3rd. Mr. Jenks,
For 2 projects, for 2.
for the lid and the subdivision.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we extend the approval date to November 3rd, close of business, for the Chestnut Meadow, 0 Chestnut Hill Road, subdivision plan and LID.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 4-0. So the period's been extended. Now we're able to continue the public hearing to October 30th at 7 PM. Mr. Jenks,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue the public hearing for Chestnut Meadow, 0 Chestnut Hill Road, to October 30th at 7 PM.
Second.
For the subdivision and LID.
Second.
motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 4-0. We'll see you on the 30th. Thank you very much. Had my head down. Did something just fall? Go down this. Glad you're back. Next item on the agenda is public hearing, Hidden Meadow Lane, modification to definitive subdivision. It's been continued from September 25th. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome back. Counsel, if you could reintroduce yourself and your client.
Sure.
And, actually, before we do that, just introduce yourself and briefly why you're here tonight, and then I'll ask the town planner and myself to update you and the public on what transpired today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marshall Gould from the firm of Gould and Ettenberg in Worcester, representing Rebecca Franks and her husband Ken, who are the owners of property on Hidden Meadow Lane. This is a continuation of a modification to a definitive subdivision that was heard at your last meeting. This followed the recommendation of town council to not deal with this as a Form A, but rather to come in as a modification to a subdivision. So we took that advice and we came forward. And I think we made our presentation last time. The very simple summary is there were 5 lots, all of which, 4 of the 5 of which were roughly 1 1/3 in round numbers acres or less. And there was this one lot that was 5 1/3 acres. And she is now looking to make 2 lots, the smaller of the 2 being about 1 1/3 acres and the other being 4 acres. I'm rounding off. I could give you the point so-and-so, so-and-so. And that's it. There would be no new road work needed to be done. It would be a common driveway coming off of the cul-de-sac, the widened portion of the cul-de-sac. The drainage would not change. The engineer was here last time. We did not feel it was necessary for him to come back because I don't think there were any engineering issues last time. It appeared to be more of a legal issue, so we are back today.
Thank you. I'll ask the town planner to give us an update on actions that she's been involved with.
Since the last planning board meeting on September 25th, where you presented your application for modification to definitive subdivision that was approved, we provided you with some information from prior meetings that you had requested. It was, I think there were 2 things I sent you. It's just not coming to mind. But they were informational about things that happened in the past during the discussions that you weren't here at the time. But in the,
This one or on the other matter that we discussed today?
it could be the other one, could be the.
It was the other
Yeah,
one that
that's
we
it. I'm just
discussed.
confused because
I don't
we
want to
talked
mix them
about
up.
both.
The other was the Killam Farm.
That's
For
correct.
the benefit of the rest of the board.
Yeah, we
There
talked about that.
Right,
I'm
there
sorry.
was nothing else on this.
A lot on the plate.
Like there's new news I don't know about.
No. So we did supply and provide town council with the case that you had given us at the last meeting.
Okay.
And in that, we got some feedback, and I'll let Don talk about that.
This afternoon, I received a phone call from town council regarding this, and as we stated in previous meetings, you come here, you're always welcome. Proponents are always welcome to bring their attorneys or the clergy or others. But we told you at the beginning, told you in the middle, we're telling you tonight, we don't have our lawyer here. And unfortunately, he has, for the last, I guess, 2 or 3 meetings that we've had, he's had major conflicts, including tonight.
Okay.
He said he had a triple conflict tonight. How he deals with that is his business,
Right.
but the bottom line is he's not here.
Okay.
And it was his, and I agree with this, it was his desire to come here and address this in person and allow the public to hear him advise the planning board, have the planning board be advised in public, and then take appropriate action. Also, to be able to have an open discussion with you, lawyer to lawyer.
Okay.
So that's where we are. I'm going to recommend to the board that we take no action tonight, and that we arrange to have a planning board meeting in the very near future where you and town council can attend, and we can proceed at that time. Our next meeting is October 30th. I haven't verified with town council if he's available, but all of this can be arranged through the town planner, your schedule, town council's schedule. And if necessary, and I told this to Aldo this afternoon, I said, you know, the planning board has a long history of, you know, flexibility relative to meeting days and times. So if it's a non-Monday when you two can meet, then we'll discuss that with the board and see if we can get ourselves together for, you know, an out-of-sequence meeting, even if it's just for this matter.
I did talk with Karina today, and I told her on the other matter that we discussed, that if it were to be continued to Monday, October 30th, I could be available. So if he can make it on the 30th, that would be fine.
Good. That's the way we'll move out, and if he can't, or maybe even if he can, we'll
Just conference a
we'll
call
have
then.
a Plan B date maybe,
Okay,
if something happens to the October 30th.
right. Okay.
Okay,
We're okay.
very good.
You understand?
Now, yeah, that's right. Our next meeting after that is November 13th, is that right, Karina? And the modification approval period is November 5th. So if for some reason we can't meet on October 30th, and we can't meet until November 13th, then you would be able to submit a request for an extension
Yes,
that we could act on October 30th, and you wouldn't have to be here.
okay. I could do that.
Just so that the period doesn't lapse.
I'm going on the record to say I will do that.
So it's your intention to not let the period lapse.
Correct.
Thank you.
I don't like to do that with boards, so I'm happy to cooperate.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Need a motion to move this?
That's right. We need to move, to extend the, to continue the public hearing to,
Probably 7:15.
7:15. Mr. Mills.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we move the public hearing for continue the public hearing for the Hidden Meadow Lane modification for defined subdivision to October 30th at 7:15 PM.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? That includes the public. Any questions or comments? All in favor? 5-0. See you then,
Thank you.
hopefully. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public hearing, 28 Boston Road. There's three public hearings, the last of which would have started at 7:55. It's now 8 o'clock, so we have a public hearing for the major site plan approval, 28 Boston Road. Public hearing, special permit, lower impact development, 28 Boston Road. And special permit, flexible development, 28 Boston Road. So I'll ask, you have the public hearing notices. I'll ask the town planner to read the public hearing notices.
Public hearing notice for major site plan approval, special permit for lower impact development, and special permit for flexible residential development for 28 Boston Road, Assessors Map 55, parcels 69 and 120. Per Section 17410 of the Southborough zoning code, the planning board of the town of Southborough shall hold a public hearing on Monday, October 16th, 2017, in the Thomas J. McAuliffe Hearing Room, second floor townhouse, to consider the application of William and Christine Putri for major site plan approval at 7:45 p.m. Per Section 174-10.1 of the Southborough zoning code, the planning board of the town of Southborough shall hold a public hearing on Monday, October 16th, 2017, at the Thomas J. McAuliffe Hearing Room, second floor townhouse, to consider the application of William and Christine Putri for flexible residential development special permit at 7:50 p.m. Per Section 174-10.1 of the Southborough zoning code, the planning board of the town of Southborough shall hold a public hearing on Monday, October 6, 2017, at the Thomas J. McAuliffe Hearing Room, second floor townhouse, to consider the application of William and Christine Putri for lower impact development special permit at 7:55 p.m. These hearings concern the development of a 6-unit development in 4 separate buildings on a 5.12-acre parcel located at 28 Boston Road, Assessors Map 55, parcels 69 and 120. A copy of the plans and applications may be reviewed at the office of the planning board at the townhouse during normal business hours. Any person wishing to be heard on the proposed plan should appear at the time and place designated.
Thank you. Terry, is he set up in the right location? Okay. Mr. Bemis, good evening. You're on.
Great. Good evening, Peter Bemis, Engineering Design Consultants, and I'm joined this evening with William Poutre. He's in the to my right. And what we have before you is a 6.1 acre parcel at 28 Boston Road. There is an existing home on this property, 28, located here in the lower right. To the west of that property is the Roman Catholic Church. Walker Street is the rear portion of that property here. And our lot is shown here in this outer orange, so I'm just going to follow up the line to see what that boundary is. You have lots that back up to Walker Street. Then you've got lots that are on East Main. Comes back across, you have lots that are on Thayer. Coming back along again, this is the open space as part of Thayer. And then we've got one property here to our east, LeBarry is the property here. And this is our conventional plan. Starting with that because that's what we get by right. We've opted to file with you special permits for a flexible development, for a lower impact development, and for a major site plan review. We would also need to file with the Board of Health for our project, and we'll also need to file with Conservation for a stormwater permit. We have already filed for the stormwater permit, and we will be filing with the Board of Health. So to outline what the flexible development requires is that you have to show a conventional plan. So what I have before you is a 7-lot conventional plan. Lot 1 does encapsulate the, we're going to go backwards, I guess, with 7. 7 does encapsulate the existing house. Lot 6 is in this configuration. We've got 4 here crossing the wetland. We would have a common driveway that would be allowed to get to Lot 4. We've got Lot 3, 2, and 1 with our right-of-way. And we're using about 30,000 square feet to form the roadway with this conventional plan. Our preference is to create a single lot for development, which would include basically 1.1 acres here, which we are going to raise the existing house. And then we've got our open space parcel here, which is the rear portion of the lot. So all of the homes that basically abut us on Walker Street, on East Main Street, on Thayer, would have open space to the rear boundary. The wetland itself would be protected with that open space. And we've seeking to set aside a parcel A. And parcel A is a lot that we would donate to the Roman Catholic Church. We're setting this up as an approval not required plan. We gave you this illustration to show you what it would look like. We have not filed it because you would have an action period with which to act on an approval not required plan. So we won't submit that until we get further down the road and we're closer to rendering a decision. And if we have to, we can give you extensions on that. But I just wanted you to have it for the record as to what the plan itself would look like to reference the lot. I am anticipating having to get that endorsed before you render your decision, because we would want to have this at the Registry of Deeds anticipating that decision. That's at least the thought that I had. If council sees it differently and we can do them all together, then that's fine with us. Our proposal. So again, under conventional, we would have 7 house lots. We have an underlying Residence B zoning district that's 25,000 square feet with 125 feet of frontage. And under flexible development, we would be proposing 6 units of housing. The 6 units of housing are shown in orange. There are 2 duplexes with 4 units total, and then 2 single units having our 6 total units. The footprints of each of those are the same. We have a common driveway that will gain access to those units. The entry would be here, so it's a one-way travel flow going in a counterclockwise direction with exit here. And we are proposing a retaining wall along the front of Boston Road. I'll show you a little bit more detail on that in the next plan. We've got soil testing that we've conducted out on the site, where we've got a distribution for our septic system, and then we had additional testing for some of our more stormwater management systems that were closer to each of the residential units. On our grading and drainage view, which is the view to the left on in your sheet set, you can see we have stormwater management located here on the right side of our driveway, located in the front of units 5 and 6, units 3 and 4, units 1 and 2, and then to our west along our exit driveway here. Again, there's the retaining wall that's being proposed. Our soil absorption system would be located behind that retaining wall. And we've got landscaping that we're proposing along our perimeter. We've got a evergreen screen that's going to be located here to the west along the Roman Catholic Church, to our east along the LeBarry property, and we've got street trees along Boston Road. The details for the stormwater management system, we've got flow diffusers that'll be located in all of these leaching areas. That detail is located here. The retaining wall is located in the middle of the sheet. We've got a construction entrance apron that's located on our exit driveway. There's an existing paved driveway there that we would utilize during our initial construction, and then we would revert back to a construction entrance apron as we put in get our area ready for future pavement. Our pavement details are here. We've got we've got a concrete Cape Cod berm located along our perimeter of our paving limits. Sedimentation erosion control methods and procedures are outlined here. We have a standalone sheet 1 of 1, which is our stormwater management plan. This is a SWAP basically, with an outline of the operation and maintenance during construction, and then our post-construction requirements, because we need to maintain all of these infiltrative drainage systems. Many of the details that you saw on the previous plan are repeated on this plan, because it's basically a standalone plan for that permit that we'll be obtaining through the Conservation Commission and our NEPDES permit from the federal government. So as you stated in our application, again, we have our 3 permits that we're seeking from you, 2 special permits and the major site plan review. We have development on basically an acre of land that's going to be affected, where we have a 3.5 acre set aside and then an acre donated to the Roman Catholic Church. The alternative would be to develop a 7-lot subdivision, which would be basically affecting the entire 6 acres of property. Our preference is obviously for the flexible development, and we look forward to your support on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good presentation, Mr. Bemis. Open it up to the board. Mrs. Luttrell.
Mixing things up here, going first. So the conventional plan, well, first of all, I want to say I like the plan in general. I like the clustering of buildings and all in the small lot up front in the big open space parcel. But the conventional plan is based on the entire site, yet the flexible plan is only based on 5.5 acres of the site. So either the conventional plan has to be based on 5.5 acres, or the flexible plan has to be on the whole site.
We could set aside and just make it 4.5 acres and not donate any land to the church. We saw it as an opportunity to pursue a flexible plan, but then also use the ability to do this project, denoting that we have a 7-lot subdivision versus a 6-unit set aside. We really only have to max with 6 units. So we're basically taking out one of those lots, if you will, and giving it to the church. That's how we're doing the math. I don't disagree with your assessment. I look forward to being able to still continue to donate land to the church, but if we can't, then we'll just have to table that option, because this is our conventional plan. And you can see that the land in question does affect a portion of our road. I'm not going to disagree with you. But the goal here was to minimize footprint and maximize opportunity for abutters.
Okay, so I agree with that, but you can't have it both ways. The conventional plan to show your number of units has to be on the site of the flexible plan. Otherwise, you could show a conventional plan on 200 acres and then say we get, 200 units and then put it on a 5-acre site. That
Okay.
doesn't make any sense.
If your perspective is somewhat exaggerated, we're trying to keep ours somewhat simpler than that, but at the end of the day, I don't disagree with you, and if we can't do this with land area with the church, then we'd have to rethink that. This is our proposal currently, is to set aside 1 acre for the church.
Okay. And I question whether if you could go back to the conventional
Sure.
plan? If Concon would approve that lot right there, that the cul-de-sac is within the 20-foot no-touch?
The cul-de-sac itself does stop, actually, prior to it. The right-of-way does enter into that 20-foot.
And with the wetlands up front, they would approve that?
Well, no, as I said, the access to this would be via a common driveway. So these 2 lots are allowed by right you can allow to have 2 lots that are accessed over a common driveway by right, as this subdivision would be by right. That's what we're not showing you something that needs something special approval for. It's a 7-lot conventional subdivision allowed by right. The minimum lot area is 25,000 square feet and 125 feet of frontage. And these lots, many of them exceed that.
Right, but it has to meet, like, the requirements of subdivision and conservation and Board of Health.
Yep, and we believe we would
So you'd have
comply
your
with them all.
septic, you'd be able to put a house with the septic setback up there?
In this area, sure.
And on the other one down there?
Mhm.
So, so the open space is based on the 5.5 acres, not the whole site. So you're short on open space.
Again, with the donation of land to the church. So if we don't recognize that having a value that's commensurate with the set aside of the open space, then I don't disagree. We felt as though that had a very high value to be able to assist an abutter with providing them an acre of land. So we thought that was a very important feature to offer in this development. If we're not allowed to do it because we're not seeing the dynamic of what a flexible development is, then, because I think there are provisions in there that give you that latitude. You as the board collectively have the authority to do this. But if you feel as though as a collective you can't support that, then I'm fine with it.
Well, I support
amend
the
it.
flexible subdivision, I'm just,
I just think there's latitude within the bylaw to give you that flexibility that we can do something like this for an abutter as part of the project, recognizing what this abutter is. It's not like I'm just giving it to some other landowner to be able
well,
to
I'm not going to
develop it.
argue with the Catholic Church.
Okay,
but-
I'm just saying to you that that's what we've set aside. That's our proposal.
But, well, so if you have so you know where I'm coming from.
I don't disagree with you, but I'm saying I think you have that the flexible development provisions give the board the authority, because it's a special permit, that you can put conditions on this project, and we can impose conditions on ourselves, which I believe we're doing here, that can better not only the development opportunity that we're trying to pursue, which I believe is far less onerous than what the conventional would be, but then also be able to assist an abutting property with, potentially improving their ability to use their site. So that's how I see it.
Okay, I disagree, but I'm going to move on. The trees that you list, they're all non-native? And
I can do natives. We tried to pick street trees that we thought would be attractive from the streetscape perspective, and I'm certainly game to put in a native tree.
we do encourage native species.
Not a problem.
And have you used any LID techniques in?
Oh, I think so, yes. All these infiltrative drainage components. I mean, we're not using rain gardens. Unfortunately, when we have a very small development area, we just don't have the room to use some of those techniques. We have to do it, basically the mechanical way, if you will. I have treatment systems. I'm picking up stormwater with a closed drainage system, and then I have a treatment unit here, which is going to treat that stormwater runoff before it gets infiltrated into the ground, but I'm not using I'm still a green technique, but it's not a planting area. I just don't have the room for it, unfortunately. So you trade off some of those things that you might get when you have a lot more land area. We just don't have it here.
Okay. I think one of the units that abuts one of the parcels on the right doesn't have it. Per the bylaw, it requires 2 times the side yard between multifamily dwellings and the boundary of the MRD.
Yeah, no, that's, I don't believe it's being read properly. That was a comment that Fuss and O'Neill had made, I believe you're talking about, which is the unit separation?
No,
Okay.
the visual buffers.
Visual buffers.
It requires 2 times the required side yard between the multifamily dwellings and the boundaries of the MRD. 174D5D.
Yeah, I believe that's the section regarding the separation. It talks about groups.
No, it's the one right after that.
Let me just find it, because I don't want to. So which one is it again? 17.
17413. 13.2
5.
D5D.
Should be assured through providing yards of double the usually required dimension between any multi-family structure or parking area for 6 or more cars. So are you looking at it in terms of the LeBarry property? I guess I'll look at this closer, and we'll just ensure that we are doing that. I mean, we certainly don't have any lighting that's going to cause any impacts. We did put the landscaping in on both of those perimeters to address having no visual buffer between the building sites and our abutters.
It's Unit 6 in the boundary of the property.
Right,
There isn't
and so, the abutter to our east is the residential set-aside land that's the open space from Thayer Lane,
Okay.
not a residential lot.
Well, it doesn't say a residential lot. It says the boundary of the major residential development.
Okay, we'll just go back and look at it. If we have to put the units closer together, we can. I mean, you do have a provision to allow up to 4 units connected. We were trying not to have that appearance to Boston Road. We have the duplexes. We actually looked at this to try to do it as singles. We just don't have the room to run singles going across and having enough separation to make it look reasonable and correct. So we ended up having to go back to duplexes. But our initial look at this was to try to do 6 singles coming across. So I'll have to look at it, Mimi.
And the last thing, the open space restriction should be on the plan, like what the allowable or prohibited uses of the open space.
Well, sure, we could do that. Yeah, absolutely, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stein?
Mr. Bemis, one of the special permit considerations is residential proposals should serve housing needs of local residents. Can you speak to that?
I think this type of housing will definitely meet the needs of the community. I think it'll be affordable housing. We're not putting it into a classification that meets a certain monetary system for affordable, but when you do homes like this and you cluster them, you're putting in a diversified housing stock, you're diversifying the housing stock, and you're making buildings that are, I think, going to be more affordable to residents of the town.
So
We can be more articulate on those points. I can ask Mr. Putre to
Please.
put together some numbers in the future, and we can define what those are. But I would see this as being an affordable project as a community standard.
Can you get into a little bit more detail on the screening, particularly, well, what's the height of the proposed wall?
Yeah, I thought he put the elevations on that top and bottom of wall, but I'm not seeing it here. We'll define that on the future plan. I want to say it's on the order of 3 feet high
Okay,
across the
so
front.
what's gonna be behind the proposed wall immediately?
Be earth. I mean, that's an open.
again,
It'll be earth. I mean, it's going to be a ground, open ground area to the back of wall. So the wall's coming in along the back of the right-of-way of Boston Road.
You know, I mean, the way that I read the code, there should be screening. I hope that you'll consider that with, you know, in the area, sort of inside the driveway, if you will, there would be plantings to screen the housing from Boston Road.
I mean, we're hopeful that our homes and our residences here would be attractive to the street, and we're trying to make it part of the streetscape. I don't want to hide behind the screening, but we can do some more complementary screening. I mean, without a doubt, we identified where the trees are going to go. I mean, there's certainly going to be a lot of shrubbery, and there'll be perennials and some other gardens in the area.
Should have
So
that
we can.
turf.
No, it's not going to be all turf.
Okay.
So we can develop
I'm
the
not
landscaping
understanding
plan
that
further. Okay, I hear what you're saying. After the street trees, I would think we'd be open to the street. I mean, we want our residential units to be visible to Boston Road, without a doubt.
I'm sorry, I guess I'm just not understanding. What's immediately behind the proposed wall? There's got to be something there.
Yeah, well, right now, the way it's drawn, it would just be implying that there's turf and lawn, but I think we could do some landscaping there.
Okay.
We can put some gardens there to make that a little bit more interesting and attractive. But I don't want to be putting in arborvitaes there and screening my new home development from Boston Road, because I don't want to hide.
So, you know, I also am encouraged by the concept of the flex. Maybe speaking a little bit to Mrs. Luttrell's point, what is the church's intent with parcel A? Maybe somebody can speak to that, and that might help allay the concern.
I'm personally not prepared to speak to it. If someone's here that wants to, I will, or I'd be prepared in the future to address that and give you something in writing with it. I mean, you can see that if you look at that plan when I started, where their building is, right on that boundary. I mean, it makes perfect sense for them to have some adjacent land so that they have the freedom to try to do something else with their property. And we're not discouraging that. We're actually trying to encourage them to have the opportunity to reuse their property and find a better way of possibly accessing it and using it.
So this is on Route 30. Have you had any interface with Mass DOT?
This section of the road, I don't believe, is restricted with Mass Highway as far as regulatory on the curb cuts. I did speak with the Department of Public Works about it, and I've spoke to Fire about it as far as access.
How many cars? I mean, we think we'd probably be adding 12 cars, I assume.
I would, say that's easy as far as the traffic demand, but this section of Boston Road, you've got good sight distance in both directions, having the one-way travel flow in and out of the site makes it pretty efficient as far as seeing cars along that stretch of road. I'm certainly not going to change the dynamic of Boston Road in one bit.
Mr. Jenks,
Would you run through again the discussion about the ANR?
Well, we know we need to create a plan of land for this property, because currently what exists, actually, I'll start with this, would be that orange, the outer boundary of the orange line. That's what exists today. There's actually a single lot when they subdivided it, so 28 stands on its own as well within that. So from my perspective, I would want to define what my permits are applicable to. Now, it could be, you could apply it to what the two deeds that Mr. Poutre has, because he has he has what he purchased from the Donahue family when he purchased the property, and then he has what he purchased from the Catholic Church for the wedge here. So we have two pieces of property, and from my perspective, I wanted to get them all contained on one lot that I was going to define. So that's the thought that I had, was that we could provide you with an approval not required plan, creating Lot 1, defining what its open space limit is, and Parcel A, which Parcel A could be conveyed out if we get that far. Because clearly, if I have to show all of this as being my conventional plan, and I'm just developing one less lot, and it could be that I just do a 6-lot development with this plan, and I could still give the church a wedge of land, but it won't be 1 acre at the end of the day. Because I'm not trying to get 7 units here, I'm only trying to get 6. So the idea was that the major residential development, you need to show how many units you can get conventionally, and then you can do the flexible. So we would have the ability to give the Catholic Church some land, but probably not what I've configured here as Parcel A.
You have 2 lots now.
I do have 2 lots
described
now.
in separate deeds.
In separate deeds, yeah.
Each of the 2 have the required frontage on Boston Road.
One has frontage on Boston Road, but not a required frontage. The other one does. Well, the other lot does, right.
Both current lots on that I have deeds to.
Right.
We went through an A&R process here, and each of those lots.
But Bill, there's a matter, you don't have a deed, you have a deed. You have a plan of land on record and you have a deed.
Right.
But I'm saying to you, you've not deeded this.
No, you need them.
He's
There
not
are 2
deeded,
mics
he has not deeded himself the entire piece as 1 unit. Okay, we do have an approval not required plan that shows 28 standing on its own and the other piece as 2 separate lots today. But what I was getting at was, when you're going back in the title for the deeds, we have the deed that came in from the church, okay, for this small wedge of land, and we have what we acquired from Donahue. And we have a few plans of land. But when you reference it, you're going to reference the deed. You're not going to reference the plan. That's the point that I was making. So what I was suggesting was that we would be able to correct this by putting on a plan of record, having that described, and we would have what we were going to give to the church described and could be of record. Then when the permits come in, it's referencing that deed. That's the only point that I was making. So I didn't mean to correct my client, but I just wanted to be clear that there's a deed for the small wedge and there's a deed for the larger piece, but no new deeds have been conveyed.
I'm totally confused as to why you would want to why you would want an ANR to describe those 2 parcels that you have deeds for? Or is it some other?
No, it was strictly to create the development parcel here that I've outlined, and then create Parcel A. That's all I was trying to suggest.
Do we have I think one of the concerns of the board would be in terms of what the church might do with that lot, would be in terms of building on it. And do we know that there are no current plans to do that?
We've not developed anything for it, other than to set aside the land.
Um, Can I speak to your client? I
Please.
seem to be going through here. Bill, it's my understanding from when you were in before that you've talked to neighbors.
I have.
Can you tell us about that, and what the,
Sure. We've attempted to reach a great deal of the neighbors. We met with people from the Thayer Homeowners Association, and they actually sent a letter in support of this to the town planner. I met with a couple of the other neighbors, Mr. Drapanos, who also sent a letter in support of the project. Our goal with this, my family's goal with this, is simple. It was to develop a conventional subdivision, take what we would be entitled to build on a smaller lot, maximize what we could give to the church, and meet the bylaw for open space. It's really that simple. It's very important to our family to donate this piece to the Catholic Church, and it's a linchpin in our plan. As far as building on it, essentially, we have discussed a few things with the church in connecting the two buildings that you see. I'll stand up. Actually, if you go back here. This is the main church. This is the parish hall. Currently, there are no restrooms in the main church. They also have a children's liturgy that takes children at the 10:30 Mass out the front door, through the parking lot, and into the parish hall. Their hope is to connect these two pieces here, and the traffic flow currently goes between these two buildings on the way in and this way on the way out. What our piece would entitle them to do is to reroute their traffic so that they can connect those two buildings. Beyond that, they don't have any other plans, but that's a very important piece to the church, and very important to us in putting this together for them.
I'll join in with the others who have spoken and say the concept is certainly one that I can support. We just need to figure out the details. And, the neighbor down in the southeast corner, have you spoken with them? And
I have not spoken with them. We did send out notifications to everybody within the required area, and
you haven't heard from them? Or?
I have not.
Peter, the drainage system, you showed six blocks, I think, that.
There's actually 7. So I can go through that.
Yeah,
So each of these 2 units would have their roof water being infiltrated into this zone. This unit is infiltrated into this zone, and these 2 units into this zone. Then there is a storm scepter system, so it's picking up that storm water that's coming off of the surface of the pavement that's here, that goes into this system, and there's one on this side that goes into this system. All of it would come down and tie into the closed drainage system of Boston Road.
You said the roof water would run into those zones. What's a zone? What is it?
They're flow diffusers, so what it's basically
Okay.
do is taking the stormwater off the roof through a conventional gutter system,
Yep.
downspout, and it's transferring it into the flow diffuser systems, And there's just a series of these chambers
Okay.
at each one of the home units, and then off to the sides of the driveway.
Do you have water leaving the site?
Yeah, the other, I mean, water leaves the site today, and water's gonna leave the site at the end of our business with this project, but it will not exceed the peak flow for the area. And we also are infiltrating requisite volumes for the project. We're just giving it an efficient passageway, if you will. What gets captured across the entire surface now will be picked up on these impervious areas and directed into the infiltrative drainage systems.
Is all of the water leaving the site flowing into the storm drain?
Yeah, yes, it will. I mean, all of our surface water is going to be collected and tied into this point here. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one, again, the trade-off you have when you have this type of density is you have to have all the infrastructure to support it in that same dense area, unfortunately. That's the burden that we had as designers to try to fit all of that in there.
Is the wall across the front of the site, is that a retaining wall? Is the earth up to the top of that wall,
Yes,
behind that?
yes.
Okay. That may explain a little more of what you were asking about.
Yeah, I mean, today when you go there, it's a hillside coming down,
Yes.
so basically we're going to be leveling off that outer area, if you will, along the edge.
And how far back from the roadway is that wall?
Well, the sidewalk's located here. It's a good 20 feet. The right-of-way for Boston Road is fairly wide through there, so we're behind that right-of-way limit.
Okay, so the wall is up to the right-of-way?
Yes, we're beyond it, yes. But I want to say from the pavement edge, it's probably about 25 feet, sidewalk's 5 feet, so about 20 feet back from the sidewalk. So it will not look ominous, if you will, along the edge of the road. And again, it's not tall to begin with.
Have you talked to our Open Space Preservation Commission about the open space and not joining it with, but butting it to the fair open space?
I know the Open Space Committee hasn't had a meeting that they've invited us to yet. We did make our submission, and we would anticipate that they would have a meeting at some point and invite us.
Okay, so you don't have any comments from them yet?
I know on Thayer, having designed it, it's really a more of a passive open space, which I would anticipate ours would be to some extent. I know Mr. Poutre indicated that the church might like to have, like a walking path there or something, and something that could be considered, but with nothing we've designed or developed yet.
No more questions now?
Thank you. Mr. Mills?
Good evening. A quick question back to the conventional 7-lot subdivision, or by right. Have you done perk tests to prove that you could actually put septic systems in on
Yeah,
all those lots?
there's a requisite amount of testing you have to do for this type of development, and we have completed that, yes. So to the satisfaction, the Board of Health has come out and inspected the testing that we need to comply with to meet the standards.
Okay.
So I've
And-
not gone out and tested every single square inch of this property, but we've done enough.
You did. And then, sorry, back to the other. Would you be open to adjusting the lot to the church to pull it away a little bit more from the wetlands? I mean, still be an acre, or, like, I know.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's gonna be something in between what I think would be the minimum that we could do and just take out the lot that we showed there, one of those lots, and what we're showing here. Again, the goal was to try to set aside 1 acre of land. That was
Right,
what
I'm just asking
my
you,
charge
like-
was, and I came up with 1 acre of land.
I think as far as, kind of unrestricted land, our goal is an acre. Our whole hope is to be able to help that traffic
Yeah.
pattern.
Understood.
Beyond that, we want to keep it cohesive shape and link it to the open space, and that's how we got to where we are right now, trying to keep something that is rectangular in nature and more conventional, but we're open to those things. And in an ideal world, I'd love to donate everything in the back to the church and put a conservation restriction on the other piece, on the required open space piece. But you know, we'd be open to your suggestions.
Thank you. No more questions at this time.
Peter, when Mrs. Luttrell was questioning the carving out of that acre and the linkage to the code, and you agreed with her, and you further stated that the board has the authority to approve what you're proposing. You know, 174-13.2, major residential development, under which is flexible development, and it's several pages. So when you come back, I'd like you to point to the words in the code that you think gives the planning board the authority to do what you're asking.
Sure.
I've read it, of course, and there's a lot of words in there that the planning board may authorize. There's a lot of, it's not multifamily requirements. The planning board may authorize. It's not a whole lot of shalls.
Oh, I'm not suggesting it shall.
Right. So
It's a special permit.
Yeah.
It's always may.
right. So I want you to come back and
Sure.
use the code, not just your opinion. Use the words in the code, point to them so that we can read them, and have full knowledge of the limits of our authority
Okay.
to do what you're asking. Taken a lot of time, and I haven't opened it up to the public yet, but before I do, I wanted to compliment the planning board and let the public, hopefully the public will appreciate the hard work that this board has done just on this one project. This is flexible development. It's a complex part of the code, a lot of different sections. You're in a dense residential neighborhood, and it's obvious from the questions tonight that the planning board, your elected planning board members, have taken time, gone into the code, and asked a lot of really good questions. And I think that they probably have a lot more, like I do, but we want to keep this moving tonight and you know, make sure that whatever the board does is within our authority and is in full reference to the code requirements and with sensitivity to the neighbors. So I'll open it up to the public. Any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am?
I'm Freddie Gillespie, the Chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission, and in a previous version of this property's plan, we did meet with the applicant, and I have to say that we discussed open space requirements, and he took that to heart, I believe, and incorporated those into, he incorporated those suggestions into this plan. And then I did speak with him before this tonight, and I indicated that I was hesitant to schedule an open space commission meeting to review this until we had some guidance on if the proposal is doable, because that changes how we would perceive it. If these lots are actually, the confusion over using a lot for the conventional and then taking a big portion of that out and then designing the project on that, we in our prior meeting, we liked the idea of the open space and the clustering, and all of those are wonderful things, but I come back to the 174.13.2 D4B5. Open space, and it's talking about this, the percentages, and it says shall be a certain percentage of the site. And my you know, are we talking about the whole site that you're using for the conventional plan? Or are you talking about that minus a significant portion of it? And like you, we have a lot of things on our plate and to meet and review it. And because as it stands now, I would say, until you say that's okay to do it or have some guidance for us, I would say the open space is based on a smaller amount of the site after you take that lot out, and therefore doesn't meet the requirements for the whole site. It does meet the requirements for what's left after you take that portion out. So is that something you plan to, I mean, we don't want to hold this up by not reviewing it in a timely manner, but I don't know how we can give an opinion if we don't know what the site legally is required to be.
And as I stated before, Freddie said we did meet, and my goal is to meet whatever the guidelines are for open space. We're trying to get a cohesive lot here, notwithstanding what my engineer said, and I'm not in conflict with any of that. We have 7 lots here. If we were to take lot number 6 out, which is very similar to the area in which we're looking to give to the church. If we were to take this out of the equation, we still have the ability to get 6 lots, which is what we're asking. If we were forced to do this, open space would actually get less than what we are offering them to do. If the board requires us to do something like this to fit the bylaw, we'll be glad to do that. The net result will be the church will get more, open space will get less, and it's going to cost me more in engineering fees. But if that's what we're required to do, I'd be glad to do it. We would meet the open space guidelines. The church would get more land. It would cost me more money, but so be it. Our thought was that all of these neighbors would prefer to abut to open space and not to a piece of land that is owned by the church. That is why we chose not to go this route. I certainly believe it is within my right to donate this piece to the church, still have a viable subdivision that shows 6, and then calculate the total of the entire parcel minus this 29,000 feet at 55%, and the net result will be open space gets less. I'm not trying to give anybody less. All we're trying to do is maximize what we give to the church. But that is certainly an alternative that I believe we have the right to move forward on.
Hello? Oh, sorry. The Open Space Preservation Commission, as I explained to the applicant, does not do zoning. We have no opinion on this. I just want to know what we're looking at for the site before we start making comments, because they're 2 very different issues. The site is the whole project area for the conventional, or take out a chunk of what you're using for the conventional, which we never have, seen before, and I'm not going to weigh in on it, because that's the planning board's decision. So, you know, whether we get less or more or not, it's more based on what the zoning code requires, and not up to us to say, well, we're going to get more open space, so we want you to ignore. And I don't even know that the calculations make more or less open space, because I haven't looked at that level of detail. But I'm not going to say ignore the zoning code because I'm going to get what I want. It's for the planning board to let us know if this is certainly a creative and unique way of coming up with this that I've never seen in many years, so we want your guidance. And if that's not coming till the end, we'll have to maybe give 2 opinions. I don't know. Is that something you'd have council look at, or?
It's your proposal. Please submit something to open space that explains, that answers her questions.
That's fair.
The planning board will not do that. You will do that, right?
That's fair.
Okay. Very
The
good.
the
Go
one thing I just want to correct, though, I want you to understand that the piece of land is the entire piece, okay? And then the conveyance, the cut-up that we're doing, again, is the entire piece. So to me, I see parcel A as being an integral part of the proposal. It's just if the board doesn't recognize the fact that we're going to develop this piece, we set aside this as open space, and this becomes an abutters piece, that they will have some activity on, and we can limit how much activity that they have. It's still part of the project. So I don't think the math is wrong or anything else that we've done here. We showed 7 lots, we're gonna develop 6 units, and we're using up all of the land, and it's being set aside as this is untouched open space, and this is a piece that our abutter, the church, is gonna use. I'll define it better, and possibly we look at this and change its geometry a little bit, but it's still part of the project plan. And I still think it fits, as long as the board recognizes the fact that we're setting aside and giving that to an abutter.
Anyone else from the public? Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Bill Boland, 35 East Main Street, and a butter to the property. Can you, this goes to East Main Street, right? So, no, that'll do it fine. I own this property here. From what's located as Mr. Arena's property, has been in the Boland family for 100 years before we sold it to Mr. Arena. I explored these lands from when I was able to walk. My father explored these lands from when he was able to walk, and his father before him. So I think I know something about what we want to call open space. And I would tell you, as an abutter, and the people from Walker Street, the people from Boston Road, the McCanns, the Anketels, the Labars, Miss Labar lives here and would be most affected by this property. I think most of us would like this proposal. If building down below is acceptable to the planning board, then I think no one is going to mind that the church gets a little extra acreage here. They own the house, which would be right here next to the church land. And if they eventually extend their hall, which has been there since probably the 60s and might need some work, I don't think people are going to care because there's already a hall there. When Thayer went in, that took away some land, which was previously open space, which kids in the neighborhoods years ago explored. But that land was also accessible through a path behind the church hall, paths from Boston Road behind the old McCann and Anketel property. So if you keep this, that's going to be most like what that land is now. A development which would be conventional, which is putting houses back there, is going to take away that open space. I hear about a lot about open space. This town has at least a third open space with reservoirs and everything else. But if you're going to develop this land, in my opinion, if it's okay, down below with the people on Boston Road across the street, with Ms. Labar, who's owned that property for quite a few years, then this is a good proposal. All those neighbors on Walker Street and on East Main Street, and then on Thayer, the newer houses, will still have open space, which will sweep in all the way behind that. And if you're a kid that wants to explore, you can still go all around there. We don't need paths. We don't need anything else. You know, let kids go back to, this is woods. Let's go see what's there, and let's have a good time. Let's get back to what we really did without defining, oh, we need this activity there and everything else. For hundreds of years, you know, after the cattle were all gone here. See that strip there? That used to be for the cattle to come from this land down to the summer fields down below on the other side of East Main Street. If that works, leave this like it is. Make that open space. Who really cares if 10 years the church decides they need to expand that hall? Because they own that property there. The new people will know what they're getting into, and it's really not going to bother anyone else. So, as I say, I'm not going to get into the zoning requirements, but if that works, this is a good plan for all the abutters in that neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bowler. Anyone else? Questions, comments? We're at the point where we'll continue the public hearing. You've got some homework to do. We've got a few things, more homework on our end to make sure that we understand what's going on with the our authority and the details of the project. So we're looking at October 30th at 7:45. Does that work? The approval period for the site plan is November 24th, and for the lower impact development and flexible development, it's December 24th. So we're still well within the approval period for the whole project. Mr. Mills.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we continue the public hearing for 28 Boston Post Road, major site plan approval for October 30th at 7:45. Also that we continue the public hearing for 28 Boston Post Road, special permit, lower impact development for October 30th at 7:50 p.m. And to continue the public hearing for 28 Boston Post Road, special permit, flexible development for October 30th at 7:55 p.m.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5-0. We'll see you on October 30th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for a 2-minute recess.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? 5-0. We'll see you in 2 minutes. Planning Board is back in session after a 2-minute recess. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Isla Bella Estates Covenant. This would be Jack Bartolini. Before we, Jack, you're welcome to come up. But before we get to this, Jack's father has been before this planning board for many, many decades. And at this point in the meeting, I guess I'll turn this over to Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's come to our attention that, like you said, John Bartolini, I think, has been a lifelong resident of the town, and like you said, before this board, countless times. And it's come to our attention that he is in the process of recovering from an injury, and I'd like to make a motion that we wish him a speedy recovery.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5-0.
Thank you very much.
So we have the covenant for Isla Bella Estates. I'll ask the town planner to give us an update on where we are with this. Serena.
At the last planning board meeting, I had passed out a file copy of the covenant that was in place, which was expiring, is expiring on October 19th of this year. I realized that Jack Bartolini needed an extension, so the board wasn't comfortable voting last meeting because I hadn't verified that it was the actual same copy as what was recorded. Since then, we've supplied the planning board members with a recorded copy of the covenant that is in place, for which Jack is asking an extension to keep all the paperwork in order. And so not only did we verify that it's the original covenant is recorded, it's also the same document that you reviewed at the prior planning board meeting. So we're hoping that there can be a vote on this evening to get closure.
And what would the vote be? What would be the motion?
I have a copy of the motion to be read.
Any discussion on this? Guess I'll call on Mr. Jenks to, no? To make the motion.
Mr. Chairman, whereas a covenant was executed between Bartolini Builders, Inc. and the Southborough Planning Board on October 15th, 2015, and filed with the Worcester Registry of Deeds as Plan Book 57786, Plan 332, to provide conditions for the establishment of Isla Bella Estates, a definitive subdivision. And whereas condition number 5 in the covenant provides that, quote, construction and installation, if any, shall be completed within 2 years of the date of execution of this covenant, and upon failure to so complete said construction and installation, unless the time for performance thereof is extended by vote of the planning board, which shall be recorded, the board shall have the right to rescind its approval of the definitive subdivision plan or take other steps provided by law. End of quote. I move that the planning board vote to extend the completion date for construction at Isla Bella Estates as stated in the covenant from October 19th, 2017 to October 19th, 2019.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Jack, anything? Nothing? Motion, Mrs. Luttrell.
Just one question. The book and page that you read, is that of the covenant or the plan that's on there?
I think it's the covenant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it should really read Yeah, so the first sentence should be said, whereas the covenant filed with the Worcester Registry of Deeds as Book 57786, page 332. Does that?
Okay.
That's what he read.
There's a different,
Isn't that what,
No, it says plan book and plan.
oh,
So it should,
okay.
that was our
It
mistake.
should be just book
It
and
should be
page.
book and page because it references the covenant right here.
Covenant. Okay.
5.
Is that your amendment?
Amended? Motion to amend?
Second?
Motion's been made and amended and seconded. Any more discussion? Thank you, Mrs. Luttrell. All in favor? 5-0. Very good.
Thank
See you in
you.
2 years, Jack.
Could we get this?
We'll see him sooner
See you in 2 years, he said.
Hopefully not.
Best to your father.
Yes, I'll have it ready. Thanks, Jack.
So I signed this twice then.
Hold on, I'll show you an example of that one.
Yeah, no, this just says that I witnessed their signatures too. Next item on the agenda,
He's gonna need to have that
Stonebrook
notarized.
Village Covenant.
excuse me, Mr. Chairman. As I'm an abutter to this project, I'm going to recuse myself from my position on the planning board, but after speaking with the Ethics Commission today, they said that I could speak as an individual, as I'm an abutter.
Thank you. Daniel, good evening.
Good evening.
We'll just finish up with this other item and then we'll get started.
Go sign, maybe.
We'll cross it out. Yes. Yes. I'll ask her to, so she can get it beforehand.
I'll ask the town planner to update us on where we are with the Stonebrook Village Covenant. Vote to execute. Maybe quickly say what Stonebrook Village is, or maybe,
Okay.
okay.
Stonebrook Village is a subdivision of 3 lots that was approved back 2015, I believe. And it is 3 lots, an existing daycare, an existing house lot, and then a 15-unit, 55-plus housing development. And construction started at the beginning of this year during the transition of planners. And going through the file, we quickly realized that a covenant hadn't been produced and executed and approved. So we asked Capital Group Properties to provide us a covenant, which they did pretty timely. And we received the draft. It was reviewed by town council. They made some revisions. That's the document you have in your package this evening, which is dated, it's not actually dated on yours, but I know it was September 18th. It's a standard covenant format, and again, town council has reviewed it and said it's acceptable legal form at this time. So we're hoping that the planning board has had a chance to look at it and perhaps vote on it this evening. There were also condo docs in the works, but we're still working out some minor details, so that'll be coming in the next meeting or two.
Did you want to add anything to that, Daniel?
No.
Okay. Open it up to the board and then to the public. Mr. Mills?
So is the covenant, like on the last one, it was for 2 years, is it starting from 2 years from now, or from?
It starts 2 years from when the planning board accepts it. So the copy that we have this evening is not fully executed by Capital Group Properties and their bank, which is required. The mortgage holder has to sign as well. But Mr. DePietri had asked that the planning board review this evening to make sure if there was any changes, he didn't want to have the bank have to sign another copy. So if there are no changes, I believe it could be voted on, and they would submit an executed copy of exactly this just signed.
Thank you.
Mr. Jenks?
No, no,
Multitasking.
no questions.
Mr. Stein?
I was not a member of the planning board, so I was not a participant in the hearings on the subdivision, so I will be abstaining from the vote.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll open it up to the public. Anybody want to speak on this? Mrs. Luttrell?
Mimi Luttrell, 19 Oregon Road, speaking as an individual, as I'm an abutter to this property. I have a comment on the master deed. Are we not speaking on that tonight?
No, that's upcoming. We haven't finalized those documents yet with the
Oh, okay.
developer.
Do you want my comments so you don't have to make changes moving forward? No? Okay.
Well, I can check with you and you can give me your comments during the week, and I'll incorporate. I'm meeting with Lisa Pizzoni next week to go over the details of any revisions that we're making, that they're making to them, so that they meet what we all need in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. So we'll entertain a motion to endorse the covenant. Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the covenant for Stony Brook Village, whereas the application for a definitive subdivision plan for Stony Brook Village in Southborough, Mass. was approved in a decision by the planning board on October 21st, 2013, that the application is to execute or cause to be executed a covenant for performance granted in accordance with the section 244-11.c parentheses 4 of the Southborough Town Code, and that the covenant required to be filed with the Registry of Deeds has been submitted to the planning board prior to execution for review. I entertain the motion that the planning board vote to accept the terms of the covenant of the Absolute Realty Trust relative to said defined subdivision plan.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 3-0.
So the planning board will sign that. Elizabeth will, you don't have to sign it, the planning board signs it, and Elizabeth has to notarize it. Would you mind coming back tomorrow? You sure?
Next item on the agenda is the discussion.
That's Jack's. Elizabeth has to notarize
Hold on. So
it. Let me see what that says.
that's part of it.
Can I answer the above named planning board involved? And she signs this. It's her notary.
to do too many things at once. Okay. You might have to reprint that one, Elizabeth. Next item on the agenda is the Public Safety Building Committee Traffic Study. Jason, did you want to come up?
Mind if I stay over here? Do you want me to come up front?
You're perfectly fine.
We don't bite.
You've got the right apparel on tonight.
Matching, coordinated and everything.
Yeah. Good evening, welcome back. I'll ask the town planner to lead us off on this Public Safety Committee discussion item. Karina.
Okay, on September 18th, the Public Safety Planning Board Committee and the Planning Board had a joint meeting to discuss the public safety building project so that we would have information we needed at the time when the applicants, when the town submits applications for site plan review and LID. At that meeting, it was discussed that a traffic study would be essential for the application to be complete, and we discussed having that this evening. So the goal of this evening is to discuss the traffic study that the Public Safety Building Committee has already engaged VHB to start working on. There is a scope that you could probably explain that they're already working on, so that the planning board members could add anything to that scope if they needed to, if they felt anything was missing.
Very good. You're on, Jason.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess our committee and the various consultants that have now been hired by the town found the conversation back in September incredibly beneficial, because I think one of the things it did was not only have us focus on the public safety building, but I think when you get your initial documents for the first public hearing, you'll see it's a complete site plan. And it's, any of you that have come or watched some of our more recent meetings, you'll see it really encompasses most of that golf course, the school, and the immediate Choate Field area. One of the items we discussed at that September 18th meeting was obviously there's some increased traffic now with the public safety building, but there's also, when you start tying roads together with a school and a golf course, there may be some needs or discussions around traffic signals out at the Route 85 intersection, but also more recently we've had discussions around two-way, one-way streets, et cetera. So in the interest of providing a complete site plan package the first time, and making sure that we continue to drive a very aggressive schedule so that we are shovels in the ground in the spring, we would like some direction from you on exactly what you're looking for in terms of a traffic study. We took the liberty of engaging in getting traffic counts ahead of this meeting, because given that our application would be due next Monday to appear in your mid-November meeting, we couldn't wait obviously until tonight, get direction from you, and have an engineer wrap everything up by Friday, right? It's just not feasible. So what has been done to date is traffic counts for the school, traffic when it was in session, traffic counts for golf, and anticipated traffic counts for public safety traffic. That is going to be put together in a report in a package by Friday, so it would be submitted with the complete package on Monday. What will not be completed, but is being studied, and we're looking for definitive guidance of when and if you need this, is how exactly to run the roadways, whether they be a one-way loop all the way from Woodward all the way out to 85, or a two-way road, which is what's currently been designed, engineered, but is being studied to make sure that that's actually feasible. That's the guidance we're looking for, plus anything else that is on your mind that you would like to see this traffic study speak to. In addition, I'll just throw this out there because our consultants asked me to relay it. I'm not offended if you choose not to take any action on it, is given that the town of Southborough doesn't exactly have a, from what I understand, definitive policy on lighting for the site. They're planning to put in LED, energy efficient, low lighting. But if there's anything specific that you would like to see in the plan in terms of lights attached to the building or fixtures in the parking lot, if there's any guidance you have that you want to discuss tonight, great. I get it's not specifically called out on your agenda, so if you'd rather defer that, that's fine, but they asked me to at least raise it. So that's our update, and would love any feedback you have.
Thank you. I have a couple of items before I open up to the rest of the board. You mentioned the two-way, one-way, and the traffic counts based on the golf, the anticipated traffic for the public safety, and then the school. We've all seen, it's only a very brief time during the day, but if there's a large funeral, we've seen the traffic backed up from the cemetery all the way up through the lights and sometimes up onto Main Street, depending on which church or building they originated before they came to the cemetery. And we've seen it where the intersection at Route 30 and 85 is completely clogged because of the funeral traffic. And there's usually a policeman there that addresses that. But I think that the traffic study should include some type of a statement or data that would address how, if that situation occurred and then the fire or the police had to make a run, what the impact would be or how it would be addressed.
Okay.
Now, when for the Main Street project, it was anticipated that the fire department and the police at different times over the last few years would be still on Main Street. I remember seeing that there was proposed additional set of lights right there at the entrance and all of that. So that information is in a report or multiple reports. I think that this traffic study doesn't necessarily have to get into the details of that, but to make a narrative relative to comparing each situation, the situation if public safety was still on Main Street, located that close to the traffic lights at 85, that poses a series of challenges that were addressed in our design, at least the preliminary design. Have your consultant compare the degree of challenges or difficulty, complexity to having public safety, further down on Route 85.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably many factors that they would look at: the sight distance, the distance between traffic lights, the curvature of the road, that type of thing, and be able to compare. And probably maybe the bottom line would be comparing all of the different factors. This is safe, where we're proposing it now is much safer, and this is why. Or it's just as challenging, but different types of challenges.
Mm-hmm. I think the important thing to keep in mind at the current site is public and emergency vehicle access are shared. At this new site, fire and police would have their own dedicated driveway, which we've been discussing signage, gatage, et cetera, to make sure that there isn't any interweaving. So we're specifically talking about the public driveway because I think the emergency driveway would have some sort of emergency signal that would be triggered by the Opticom in the apparatus.
Mr. Mills.
One second.
We're going to skip over Mr. Mills right now. Mr. Jenks?
I have no comment or question.
Mr. Stein?
Thanks very much for your continued efforts on this project. Obviously, huge project for the town. And I certainly appreciate your attempt to sort of preempt or, do as much upfront diligence as possible. I think that's always the right way to do these things, is front load the process. But certainly, in terms of the lighting, minimizing the spillage, I mean, I think there's no way to prepare adequately, really. You just do the best you can, and we'll have lots of back and forth. Fuss and O'Neill will be involved, and I'm sure this will be a great outcome for the town. So thanks very much for working with us on it.
Mrs. Luttrell?
Yes, thank you for coming in. I have nothing further to add at this time.
Thank you. Going back to business about the lighting, in the zoning code, 174-12.1, outdoor illumination.
Okay. They were, the question was not necessarily type of lighting, but type of fixtures. If you care whether they're attached to the building or in the actual parking lots, or a combination thereof.
We've encouraged commercial and, industrial buildings to have the lights not mounted on the building and facing out toward the world, but to have the lights off of the building, illuminating the parking and the building from outside looking in.
That is what they were hoping you would say. So I think we're...
And there's a section, I should have it memorized, but there's a specific reference to wall packs. It's a type of light that is very bright. It's mounted on the side of the building and it shines out. The light source is very bright. You can't shield it. They say they can, but they can't. Our code specifically refers to, is it the next page? Oh, yeah, F. Says here, quotes, wall pack lighting fixtures are prohibited.
Okay. So just to clarify on the traffic, if you received a submission that doesn't dictate two-way versus one-way and assumes a two-way roadway, is that sufficient for a complete site plan submittal? Or do you need to see the exact traffic flow as it's going to proceed? Because they're focused on the 85 intersection with the driveways. It's going to take longer to fix out the inner flow, but they have everything else you need for a complete site plan. So I'm just looking for guidance so we don't run into a month of potential delay.
You'd have to have that to start us off. Our, peer review, Fuss and O'Neill, they have, part of their design team or their review team may ask for that, or they may have a comfort level and say, we're good. Usually they'll huddle with the design engineer and may ask for more stuff that may take more time.
That's understood, but it's in process. It's just a matter of what absolutely has to be in that package for the 23rd. So I think they're going to assume a two-way roadway and have something to support that before the actual hearing date.
Anyone else on the board, questions or comments? All
Thank you.
set? Great, thank you, thanks very much. You might want to, our next item, you may want to listen to this. I just want to take one second with the microphone off. The reason that we had the mic off, the upcoming statements are based on guidance from the Ethics Commission, so I didn't want to say something that was inconsistent with guidance from Ethics. So I wanted to speak to the members as to how they were going to address it, and they will. But, the reason the mics were off is I didn't want to go out of bounds and say things beyond the guidance from Ethics. So, Mr. Stein. Mr. Jenks.
I am not on the abutter list to this project. In case it was lost in the discussion, this project is the public safety building next on the golf course land. I am not an abutter, but I am close, and I wanted an opportunity to disclose that I am close to that property, and actually I'm about halfway between that property and where the current public safety building is now. So it's kind of a neutral thing for me. I do plan to participate in the planning board's discussion. I spoke with the ethics committee, and they suggested that I file a disclosure with the clerk, just to make it public that I live close to this, although not as an abutter. And I've written the disclosure, I haven't filed it yet, which is why I didn't want to deliberate tonight and ask questions. I will get that filed, and then I will be participating as a member of the board.
I'm sure the senior members of the planning board will correct me if I make any errors in this statement, because it is a little bit complicated. The quorum for the planning board for a site plan review is 3, whereas for the special permit for low-impact development, it's 4. Like Mr. Jenks, I consulted with the attorney of the day for state ethics, who simply sent me a link to the public advisory regarding rule of necessity, which dictates that as a last resort for a quorum on the special permit for low impact development, because the board would not otherwise have a quorum for that matter, although I am an abutter, I am the second least abutting person on the board, and therefore it fits that definition of last resort and necessary. So I also will be filing with the town clerk for that. It's just a little bit complicated because there's the site plan review. So on that matter, I'd just be sitting here and not vote on site plan review. I'll be abstaining from that because it is actually technically not necessary for me to participate that as a voting member. You do have a quorum without me for the site plan review. You don't have it for a special permit for lead. Hope that was easy to understand.
Mr. Mills.
So I guess I am the lucky individual to be the biggest abutter, or closest abutter. I too talked to the ethics department, had a lengthy conversation about my location compared to the other members of the board. And they indicated that, yes, Jesse, that it's, you, I think, want to take the most conservative approach as possible. The concern that I would have is if, for whatever reason, if a member of the board couldn't make it or something were to happen, and we were halfway through the process, And if it was only 4 members for the lid, nothing could actually occur. So, in terms of my house location to where the safety complex is actually gonna be and, everything, personally, I don't feel that I have any conflict or that I could act, fairly and unbiased, and just as a member of the board. I am sensitive, though, to how it could be perceived elsewise in the community. So I wanted to discuss it with the board, and I would partake how the rest of you felt would be appropriate.
So, I mean, in looking at the advisory, it has an example, and I'll just read it right off of it. Example, a 5-member elected board has a meeting involving a matter in which the board is legally required to act, and 4 members are present, in parentheses, 1 member is sick at home. 2 of the 4 members have conflicts, a quorum is 3. The 1 member who is sick at home does not have a conflict. The rule of necessity may not be used because even though a quorum of the board which is able to act is not present at that particular meeting, there is a quorum of the board which is able to act. So I think that applies here, because by me invoking the rule of necessity for the lid, we do have a quorum as a board going forward, and the rule, it wouldn't apply in your case because of that.
Town council is aware of this, and he has knowledge that the various members have been in contact with ethics, state ethics, and I believe his guidance has been to be guided by the state ethics. So, wanted to let that out to the public that we're addressing this way ahead of time. We've been working on this for a while, and do not want it to impact the schedule, and make sure that the board proceeds within its authority and within the rules. Very good. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Chapter 61 Process Working Group update. Mrs. Luttrell.
I have nothing further to add. The working group was unable to meet between the last meeting and today. I still anticipate one more meeting of the working group, and we'll come up with a draft process.
Great, thanks for your work on that. Next item on the agenda, Killam Farm Open Space Deed. I'll ask the town planner, there's been some activity on this one. Seems to be still in motion, hopefully. Karina.
At the last meeting on September 25th with the Planning Board, Attorney Gould was present for the first time in the process. We had prior discussions with Brendan Giblin regarding the open space parcel at Killam Farms, and the intent for that parcel to be conveyed from Brendan Giblin's subdivision to a preservation trust versus the planning board decision which required it to be conveyed to the town. The Open Space Preservation Commission met on September 26th. They had it on their agenda. In the interim, I forwarded Attorney Gould a copy of the Northborough language, quote, that has been the acting template for open space parcels. Attorney Gould also submitted today a draft modification to that Northborough language, which would be more palatable to Brendan Giblin in the use of what they really want to continue to use that open space parcel for. And I'll let Attorney Gould expound on that.
Thank you.
One question. That submittal, was that, when did you get that?
I got that this afternoon, after we had had a
And I did
discussion.
bring copies in case you want to see it, but
Did we discuss that this afternoon, or was that afterwards?
We briefly
that was on.
discussed
I
it.
saw that, yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't go over this, but it was on your desk.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gould, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Marshall Gould again. And I want to make it clear, the original applicant for the subdivision was, I believe, Richards Road LLC, and the owner of it was Richards Road Realty Trust. So we're referring to Brendan Giblin, but Brendan Giblin was technically not an owner of either Richards Road Realty Trust or Richards Road LLC, or whatever the name was, because that was all disbanded back after 2001, and it was his dad, Kevin, who was the owner. But he came to a meeting, as you know, in August, and I was here at the last meeting, and I then spoke to him. So there are a couple of things I would like to bring up, and these are the two issues that you heard earlier that I had discussed with Karina. One is, I thank you for receipt of the proposed, what is commonly referred to as Northborough Road language, and I did make some changes. And although I don't think it's going to be necessary to discuss them all tonight, because the short version is, I think we're going to need another continuance to your next meeting. But if you would like, I did bring extra copies for you to pass out to everybody, if the chair would like. Thank you. And the second part of it, after that meeting, I was able to meet with Brendan Giblin, and I also met with Leslie Carey. And Leslie had been the trustee of the trust. And based on legal advice that had been given to Kevin by 3 different lawyers, myself and 2 other lawyers in multiple towns, they made the decision at Brendan Homes that unless they did something wrong, they should never reopen a subdivision. So that's the background that Brendan Giblin is coming from. I just want everybody to agree. So Brendan, in an intelligent way, I thought, said to me, well, what could happen if we reopen the subdivision? And I did say what the chairman reported last time, that it would be solely for the purpose of changing the language from the deed for the open space shall be given to the town, compared to the deed to the open space shall be given to the Preservation Trust, and I believe that's the name of the actual corporation. But I did say to him that, notwithstanding that that's the intent of reopening the subdivision, that once it's reopened, notice has to be given, or in order to reopen, notice has to be given to everybody who's in the subdivision, all of the lot owners from within the subdivision, and that any of them could come forward to the planning board and they could ask to raise certain issues. Additionally, as took place last time, the Open Space Preservation Committee could ask to speak to certain issues. There could be other boards in town that wish to speak to certain issues. There could be other individuals in town who aren't even part of the subdivision or those boards, but who may be involved with open space elsewhere in the town, or recreation department, or what have you, and they could ask to speak. So what we discuss as, it's just going to be solely for this one purpose, and it will be very simple, and we'll do it, we'll close the hearing, and it's going to be all done. I had to say to Brendan, I said, what your father had informed you was correct. These things could happen. And apparently, historically, in one town, something very similar did happen to Kevin Giblin. And it was based on that he advised his son, don't ever do this. So he said to me, how can we limit this? And I said, realistically, I don't think there is a way that you can. There is always a risk. And one would obviously be every member of the planning board saying in advance, we're not going to hear anything, we won't have comments, they'll be out of order. But somebody could change their mind at the time of the hearing, and something could come up. And so, hearing that, Brendan then said, okay, let's go over this stuff again. And we did go over the letter not just the letter from the Open Space Preservation Commission, or Committee, I'm sorry, that was, I think, back to August of this year, but just quickly, the history, and I can do this very fast. In 2001, this 1998 or 1999 subdivision was supposed to be finished. And the only remaining thing, one was to be a cash donation that was done early on, and the only remaining thing was a deed to the town of Southborough. And in 2001, prior to the town meeting, a deed to the town of Southborough was sent, and we know that it was sent, and we know that it was received by town hall, but we know that that deed was never recorded, and nobody seems to know where that deed is now. That's my understanding. I don't think, we know that it's not recorded, or if it ever was recorded, it certainly is not indexed properly. But everybody at Brendan Homes assumed it had been recorded. They even called a couple times to the town and said, why are we still getting tax bills? We had sent the deed in, and then they never heard back. In 2006, I believe it came to their attention because they got a notice of tax taking. And so they then said, well, this is crazy, we don't own the land, and they again checked at the registry and said, well, the deed was never recorded. It came back to the attention either of the planning board or of town council or of the then town administrator or planner, I don't know which. There's correspondence to all of them. And in 2006, as a result, they said, let's have a meeting. And documents were then sent to Aldo as town council, and he in fact made certain suggestions. There were 3 paragraphs where he said, add the word quitclaim in one paragraph, add the word of, together with the benefit of certain restrictions. And then there was one other change, which I can't remember, but 3 little things. They made the changes, they signed it, they sent it back out in 2006, or it may have been early 2007. They assumed again it would have been recorded. It was not. They started getting tax bills again, and I believe in 2013 or 14, another notice of a tax taking. So again, they called up, and at that point in time, and Donnie, I think you may have been part of a meeting, and I know that the then planner was part of a meeting, and I think 2 or 3 other town individuals were part of a town meeting that met at the property. And they said, oh, there were some things up here we would like cleaned up. And Kevin, in Kevin's wonderful way, was rather flamboyant about it and said, I shouldn't have to do all of this. This subdivision is now 16 years old. It was approved 14 years ago, but after huffing and puffing, he said, I'll clean some of this stuff out. And he called a couple of guys from his company and said, I want this done. And they claimed that the things that he agreed to do on that day, they did. He assumed it would be all set. And then the next thing we have is we have either a letter or a memo from Kevin saying that he is getting really upset because the only condition was that a deed be given to the town of the open space. Not that the conditions be put on it, not that there be any additional work on it. All of the things that were at the property were there back when it was a farm. It was acknowledged and agreed that the subdivision development had nothing to do with anything that was put onto that property. And it was not where they were building, so it was never moved. And Kevin, as a result of that meeting, and I'm not positive, Donnie, but I think you may have been, if not at the meeting, then part of a conversation, because I saw your name was CC'd on one of the things, as was Jennifer, the planner's name, I'm drawing a blank, Bernie, was it? And then a couple of other people, including Aldo. And that's the first that I had heard of it. Kevin called me up, and he said, can we just go and record the deed? I said, I don't think you ought to go and do that. Give them the signed deed again. And he said, it will be the 3rd time. I said, do it anyway. And so now we come back in August and we're being asked to reopen the hearing. And so I'm being very upfront with you and telling you why he's very concerned about reopening the hearing. Because we can say that we're opening it for one purpose, but I think the board will recognize that when you reopen the subdivision, you can't guarantee it's only for one purpose, and the people on the board could change their mind, or residents could come and could do something. And these homes at this point are largely 18 years old, and some of them have probably sold. We don't know who's going to come forward. But just as an example, and with no disrespect intended, we know that the Open Space Preservation Committee is trying to get all kinds of conditions and restrictions and everything put in there that were not part of what was there early on. It was just going to be the deed. As a courtesy, I did take the Northborough Road restrictions, and I see the one that's up there has the red line showing that there were changes made. The copy I just passed out to you shows the actual changes. You have to click on those lines in order to show the actual changes. So the one that just passed out. And as little examples, I put in how much land there is. We're dealing with about 7.5 acres of open land. This had restrictions, like it said it could only be mowed, the hay by haying by a farmer using a tractor, or one annual mowing of the land after August 1. Well, we went to the Open Space Preservation Trust, and they said, look, we're not going to agree to anything that's going to put liability on us. If some of the neighbors or somebody go in, we're not going to mow it at all. We'll just hold it as open space. If somebody goes in and mows it, we're not going to have somebody sue us and say, you let somebody do something. And even if it's not our responsibility, we as owners, we might be sued if it doesn't coincide here. So what I put, that it may be occasionally mowed, but I'm not saying by whom or whatever, just as an example. It also has language in here, the town has the right to obtain injunctive or other equitable relief for any violation, including restoring the land to the condition prior to the time. Well, again, the the Preservation Trust, they don't intend to do anything except hold it as open space. So they certainly don't want to have any injunctions or requirements that they do things. We go by what was originally offered, the deed to the town. There were 3 deeds out there someplace, all signed. We can either record it to the town, or we can have the town just say informally here, we would rather that you deed it to somebody else, and we'll have the trust deed it to somebody else if you would like. But we really do not want to reopen the subdivision hearing, whether it be at no cost or whether it be at a suggestion that there would not be any change of responsibility. There's just too much that could go wrong, and there's no upside. So that's the position right now of Brendan Holmes, that, as Brendan said, when this all came about, he said, I was a kid working for my dad. I had no ownership interest, no decision-making authority, and why is this now being thrown back in my lap 17 or 18 years later? So I explained to him why it's all here, that nobody seems to know where the deed is from '01, nobody knows where the deed is from '06. We can easily do a new deed, and I know it's not by the book, so to speak, to say, if the town votes to say, we would rather you give it to someone else, it may not be quite as legal, but we're willing to sign that deed over to somebody else. But we just don't want to reopen the hearing. So this being a new development, I told Karina that what I am very willing to do is to continue this matter to the next meeting, where again, hopefully we could have a meeting, get Aldo involved, because Aldo was involved in this on at least 2 prior occasions, and I'd be willing to be involved with that meeting. And I told Karina I'd come here, we could go to town council, whatever you want. You could have one, I know you can't have a whole public meeting, but if you want to have 1 or 2 members from this board at the meeting, we're willing to do that. We want to cooperate, but I think I've set forth the concerns.
Questions, comments from the board?
I think anytime anything's on our agenda, people can read the agenda and come and make comments, whether it's a hearing or not. I mean, tonight, the abutters could show up and we, the planning board, although it's not a hearing and we're not required to, we almost always let people speak if they're here to speak on a subject. So that's, having other people offer comment isn't just during the hearing process. It's anytime anything's on our agenda.
I agree with you. Obviously, no change could be made at the subdivision tonight because it could be for discussion, but it's not open hearing and the subdivision can't be changed. But I acknowledge what you're saying. And as I said earlier, even if the board did say, well, we're absolutely certain that all 5 of us would say we're only going to do so to change the deed from the town to the Preservation Trust, but who knows what might come up at the hearing, and somebody might speak to you, or somebody else might come forward here, and they speak well, and somebody wants to listen to them. It could even, I mean, Frederica has spoken passionately for the open space. It could be anybody who says, I want you to put all these conditions on. And Richards Road LLC or Realty Trust is not even around to do any of that anymore. And again, if we were talking about something that's been within the last year or two, I'd say, you know, that's fine, we understand and we'll do it. But remember, we're talking about something that was approved back in the 90s and it was finalized in the spring of '01. So it's, at this point, 16 and a half years later that anything was done here. And so we don't know what's been done up at that property in the last 16 and a half years.
Anyone else?
So I just so I'm clear, I heard you say that they purchased the entire property, correct? Open space, everything, when they originally did the development?
Yes.
The Giblins, okay.
Yes.
And I think I heard you say that there was one section that they didn't touch and they didn't do anything, and that, you know, that was gonna get deeded.
They bought it before it was a subdivision. They didn't buy an approved subdivision.
Right, they bought the entire property.
Right.
So,
Some of it was wooded and heavy brush, and they never touched that.
okay, but they purchased the entire site.
Right.
So, and I guess I'm kinda confused. Did you say at one point, so it shouldn't matter what's there and we should just accept it? Because that's how I kind of interpreted it, that, you know, that it should be accepted. They didn't touch it, it should be okay, don't worry about it.
What I
Is the way I
said was-
interpreted it.
What I said was, in 2000, the approval in 99, I think it was, might have been 98 or 99, said you do all these things, you build the road, you do the lots, you deed it over, and you give a cash donation to the town. And in '01, it was agreed that everything they had to do was done, and the only thing left to do was to give a deed to the town. And they did that. And so they assumed that they did, and they have letters saying the only thing left to do is now send the deed, or give the deed to the town. And they made delivery of the deed to the town. It got here. And nobody knows what happened to the deed. But we know it was received because it was received at the same time the town then approved the road. They made it as a public way. They accepted it as a public way. They accepted the cash donation to the town, and it was accepted as a town road. And in fact, we even have the warrant article from back in 2001. The selectmen took no position, and the advisory committee, 6-0, said, let's accept it. And the town did accept it. And it also said to accept the deed. But we don't know why they never accepted it. It was never brought back to the then owner. And so what I'm saying is they delivered the deed. If somebody says, you need to give us a deed, and the grantor gives a deed, and they never record the deed, the seller or the owner or whatever has done everything that they were asked to do and required to do. And so what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to be obnoxious about this in any way, I'm saying that in '06, they realized it was never recorded, and they were told, please just send a new deed. We want to have it run by town council again. And I don't know if Aldo was town council in '01 as well as '06, but we do have a letter from Aldo in '06 saying, just please make these 3 changes on the deed, and then it's okay. So they did it, and they sent it in. And then again, nothing happened.
Anyone else? You said that the warrant article vote included the town accepting the road and voted to accept the deed for the open space?
I don't know if it was. I said I saw the warrant article, and I think I have a copy of it here, but.
That's okay, we'll get to that when.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we ought to do today is agree to continue this thing, and we'll discuss it when we have the information or when town council gets involved. And that's why I knew that I was gonna be available on October 30th on the other hearing, because I had already discussed with Karina today that I assumed we'd be coming back because A, the changes here, if you want us to add those to the deed, they were not in the original deed, but we're willing to do a deed again, even though that trust has been disbanded for many years.
Okay,
And hopefully there's a way just to satisfy everybody.
keep working at it. Yes, ma'am?
Hi, I'm Freddie Gillespie. Is that on? Sorry. Freddie Gillespie of the Open Space Preservation Commission. I'm the chair. And we did have a meeting after the last time we were before you on this topic. And again, we didn't get our letter into you. And this is a little bit different, but we did, why I want to even speak is that we did say, we know this is a unique situation. My memory of the timeline since 2006, I believe, when the first time the Open Space Preservation Commission during my tenure became involved, is a little bit different, but I would say mistakes were made on the town side and the project development side is how we looked at it, and we've been trying to find a solution since 2006. And at our last meeting, having listened to what was said at the last discussion, our commission wanted to be clear that we are grateful for Brendan Holmes' willingness to continue these discussions at this time, and that we believe that whatever the process going forward is, should not be financially onerous upon Brendan Holmes or whoever is in charge of the property, that we should look at that. Part of this deed, which I will have to bring back to our commission to discuss, and it is the Open Space Preservation Commission. You had it right the first time. One thing I would just notice that you wouldn't want to say the fields could be mowed as a meadow, because you might just want to say the fields could be mowed because they're not really a meadow, which is different than a field the way they are. But that's just me seeing this just now. But I would say we look forward to a further discussion on this. We realize the difficulty for the planning board and for Brendan Holmes, and at this stage of trying to find a solution after over a decade, want to see the best result we can get, which may not be the ideal result we had written in our past letter, which we also think is justifiable because of the language in the bylaw, but understanding the point that this was already done as a subdivision. We're not starting over again. There are different requirements for land that goes to a land trust than land that goes to the town for open space in a subdivision, and our comments before were clearly in line with the requirements for land going to, not to the town, for open space, for, you know, everything we asked for were in line with that. But this is not a new, we realize now this is not a new subdivision. So maybe a little bit change in our comments will be forthcoming after reviewing this, I guess I would say. But again, we need to discuss as a whole, but I did want to state our, at our last meeting, our willingness to want to make this move forward, keeping the land as open space, appreciating what Brendan Holmes is trying to accomplish now with the work of the planning board, and move on, you know. But also making sure that some of the intent of the original, when it went to the town, was still there. The public access, which maybe shouldn't be in the deed, but the Preservation Trust would have the opportunity to make that decision. I mean, those are the types of things that the previous plan for the land to be going to the town were considered. And the only other thing I would suggest you look at is we are aware that part of the open space designated parcel includes detention basins, and some of that language there may not be in line with that, and we certainly recognize, I believe the town has the responsibility of maintaining those, so you might want to call that out as an exception when you're looking at the deed. But we can, the Open Space Commission will, as a commission, should meet on that, but I think our last letter referenced that, so I think that's it. We just wanted, I just wanted to express our willingness to help move this forward in the most, shall I say, compatible way as possible. If that's the right term. Thank you.
And if you want one of these, Frederica, I have, as opposed, oh, it's up there now, sorry. You clicked on it.
I would make the following comment. The Northborough Road language was more of a template, and it was designed specifically for different properties so that it would, the original land had fields that were hayed, so that was why that language is in there. It would not be the same for a woodland open space parcel or for a land that has a playing field on it currently, even though it's a neighborhood playing field and a detention basin.
And one of the areas where I was not certain, I know last time I said, what is it the board wanted on it? And I did go back and pull out the plans from the registry, and Frederica is right. Part of it is open space, part of it is wetlands, and part of it is a drain easement. And I can't tell how much is what, but if it's 7.5 acres, it looks like, you know, 40% is probably open space, 40 to 50% might be, well, 40% wetlands, and then the other might be open space that's not real usable because it's long and thin other than to walk along it. But I believe, Mr. Mills, I think it might have been you who said your child goes up and plays with someone who lives up in the area. I might be wrong as to who it was. Somebody said they might just want to play there or toss a ball around or whatever the case is. Someone else has said to me in the past that this is a ball field, and I don't know if they meant a town field or not. In the correspondence, I saw reference to a soccer field, so I don't know if there's ever been a soccer field up here. So again, I think it's important that the planning board and open space get in their mind what they want, because if they do want it to be used, as I discussed with Karina today, for passive recreation, it won't be used for too much passive recreation if the grass gets real high, and I don't know, in my checking the background, the right-of-way to get back here is a 12-foot wide easement, and I don't know if a farmer were to go up to hay it, I don't know how wide an easement he would need, whether it would be wider than 12 feet or not wider than 12 feet. So those are some of the questions that I had, which is why I think a work session might be needed. That's why I suggested to Karina we probably would continue this.
We'll try to put this on our next agenda. We'll discuss this with town council, and if not, it'll be shortly thereafter.
Okay.
It's a discussion item. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 135 Deerfoot Road, Chapter 61, Forest Land, Notice of Intent. The planning board submitted a letter to the town administrator that I signed. It's on the website if anybody wants to see it. It basically talks about recommending that the town take a vote on whether or not to exercise the right of first refusal on purchasing some or all of the land. Mr. Mills?
Yeah, and just an update on that too, from a CPC perspective. The CPC did take a vote to help fund the possibility of purchasing the land for multiple CPC uses not defined yet. That would enable this to move forward for the selectmen. I know that the chair of the CPC is working on fine-tuning that to get it in front of the selectmen for tomorrow night. But that is moving forward.
Any questions or comments on that? Move on to the next item, 6 to 8 Turnpike Road, the lighting at this new building was brought to our attention formally by actually town council driving by and noting the extreme level of light coming from that site. I also noticed it, but didn't bring it up until Aldo brought it up, so that's why we put it on the as a discussion item. As you know, when the town approves a site plan, we have 1 year to adjust the lighting. We're within that 1 year, and in my opinion, that lighting needs to be adjusted. Anyone else from the board go by there at night? Mr. Stein?
Absolutely. It's struck me many times as I've driven by that that could be reevaluated.
There's like a ribbon of fluorescent lamps that encircle the building on the overhang. And it seems that that ribbon of fluorescent lamps is is what's causing the excessive lighting. I asked that we have the plan tonight to see if those were on the plan. Karina?
I looked through the electrical site plan, and I don't see any evidence of lighting indicated on the building itself. I look at the, the light shed plan for foot candles, and I don't see any higher foot candles around the building than anything other than what the parking lighting portrayed. So when you look along the foot candles, if there were lights incorporated into this lighting plan, there should be a little spike at each one of these wall packs, or whatever they put on their perimeter building lighting. I didn't find
Not
any.
wall packs.
No, not wall packs. I didn't find any details of any types of other lighting. I did find on a floor plan in the electrical set, electrical lighting plans, there's some indication right here. So the parking lights were approved around the perimeter of the parking lot. Then there were 2 wall-mounted, building-mounted for signs, lights. Some kind of hook-shaped light was approved in the decision as well. And I'm not sure if this footprint of the building, this floor plan with the electrical, if that's what this indicates. I didn't have enough time to look at it to see. But again, the decision just says X amount of lights in the parking lot and 2 sign lights on each side of the building, or on each part of the front.
So in the past, when we've had discussions about adding more light, where the approved plan was not sufficient and there were dark spots and there was concern about safety, and we've actually added lighting. And in other cases, where we've had situations where the lights were too bright, we've asked the proponents to come in. And in most cases, or at least all cases except for one that I can think of, the proponent, the owner, agreed with the planning board's direction to reduce the lighting. So what I would suggest is the town planner invite the owner to come in and have a discussion about those lights. If the board, if we agree, or the majority of us agree that there needs to be something done, then that's what, I think what the next step is.
I agree.
Agreed.
So we'll ask the town planner to invite the owner to come in, and we'll have that discussion. Anything else? Next item on the agenda is Main Street Reconstruction Project. I asked to have this put on the agenda. I noticed recently on the state website that the 100% design drawings were received by Mass DOT on October 5th, is what the website indicates. So the 100% design drawings exist, apparently, and I looked around on the town's website and on the state website. I'm not the greatest at that, so maybe they're there, but I'm not sure if those 100% design drawings are available on the web. We should start looking at them because they've just recently been submitted. They're on the tip. They're in the queue for being advertised, and at some point a bid opening. And I think that it's important that the townspeople, planning board, and others get a chance to look at those, be aware that they're out there, that they're done, and to make sure that they're consistent with what we were promised a year ago when we voted to go ahead with the project. I note that the town website does show that there were 3 meetings of the Main Street working group. There's one in January, one in April, and one in July. And their agendas are posted, but their meeting minutes for those 3 meetings are not. So the reason I wanted to put this on the agenda was to update ourselves and the public in addition to those other pieces of information that are on the website. So we'll keep an eye on this, and we'll maybe have more discussion about it as time goes by. Any questions or comments? Mr. Mills.
No questions. Thanks for the update.
Next item on the agenda, tree management program. I'll ask the town planner to, this was a project that was, we hired a consultant to take a look at our tree management program in the town, and in our packet is a draft report from our consultant, Mass Audubon. I guess we don't need to discuss it. We just got it, so,
Actually, it's not in your packet. I have it for handout here.
oh, okay, yeah.
I made copies
It's
in
not in
case
the,
anybody else wanted to see it.
I was wrong. It's not in the packet. It's still a draft.
Would anyone like a copy? I can pass it down. Anybody want one? Or I'll have them in my office too if you want them.
So we'll move on to the next item, the Fitzgerald General Store parking lot project. I'll ask the town planner to give us a little bit of the recent history and the current status.
All right. Give me 1 second. Okay, over the summer, we were approached by the owner of Fitzgerald's store, 110 Southville Road, and his architect representative to figure out what they still needed to do in order to have a pre-construction meeting. They did start some work there, and I know that conservation had some concerns because they hadn't gone through fully addressing everything they need for the pre-construction meeting. So Beth Rosenblum and I worked with them over a couple of weeks, several weeks, to determine what they still needed to provide. So we did all that, and they have a nice punch list, and they were pretty enthusiastic at that point to move forward and get us that information. I also spoke with their contractor, who had the same, I gave him the same information, and they were going to get together and get everything in. But since then, it's kind of fallen off the map for them again. Unfortunately, their special permit for lid was only good for 2 years, and that expired, I believe it was October 13th. And the permit for major site plan approval is expiring on, I think it was November? Yeah, or first or week and a half into November. I did email them on several occasions to encourage them to submit the information, a list identifying very clearly what they needed to submit, trying to get them caught up on it. They did come in several times, so they've already expended their site plan approval extension for 1 year. So once that expires, they'll have to come back for major site plan approval again. And definitely the lid has expired. So I did email them as recent as last week to remind them, but I haven't heard back, so we'll wait to see what happens.
We've also, town planner either has or will be notifying the building inspector so that of these expired dates, and keeping an eye on the site in case activity resumes, which would be beyond the permitted time. Anyone else? Mrs. Luttrell?
So their site plan was extended and it expires, the extension expires in November, you said?
Yes, because site plan only is good for a year,
Yeah.
and then they're allowed one extension for a year.
Correct,
And that
okay.
kind of lines up with the 2 years that expired for the lid.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the planner's report. Karina?
Okay, real quickly, just wanted to update you, the EMC, our project for roadway acceptance of the subdivision and the A&R, that's still pending. I haven't heard back from Beals and Thomas, who's the representing engineer, so we're still waiting for them to contact us about moving forward with an A&R. Town of Westboro again endorsed the A&R for their portion in the town, and those are only good for 6 months for the registry, so hopefully they'll get going. I have a project fact sheet if anybody's interested for the Route I-495, I-90 interchange project. You'll notice it's at the bottom of the stairs too, so if you want to grab one of those, yeah, that's kind of informative. You can go to the website, it tells you all about that. Last week, Vanessa Hale emailed us a advisory newsletter from a legal counsel firm that puts these out, and there were some open meeting law changes that took effect October 6th. Elizabeth, was that in the package?
Yep.
I think it was. So it was just one pager, quick read. It's pretty interesting. I think there were like 1 or 2 things that were pretty applicable to here that might impact something. Couple things. The EDC was working on an RFP. There's a nationwide RFP to site a headquarters for Amazon, and it's a big project, but the whole country, major cities are all submitting RFPs. So we provided information to the city of Marlborough, who spearheaded an effort to submit a proposal for locations in the boroughs, just in case there's a chance for that. So, you know, everybody has a shot. And that being said, out of that came, they need to submit fiber mapping, fiber optic locations. And for $500, if the town wishes to contribute that, we'll get GIS mapping for fiber that can be used for other projects. So I'm not sure how applicable that is to the town, but I know Marlborough and Northborough already said that they would look into that. So if the Board of and the Board of Selectmen are aware of this, but I just wanted to let you know that that's on the table. Might be something we could get. The EDC also has a downtown, put out a survey in the Business Village District, of which they're going to give out results October 23rd at the Senior Center at 7 p.m. They got more than 400 recipients, just asking about what kind of changes they want to see there. Then there's also several new businesses in town, Mexican restaurant, a wellness, and you can go to the EDC website and see that too. Let's see, and that's it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Karina.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of meeting minutes, August 21st, 2017. Mrs. Luttrell.
I move to accept the meeting minutes for August 21st, 2017, as edited.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Jenks.
Just a minute, just a minute. No, not on that one.
Any other discussion? No discussion. All in favor? 4-0 to 1. Can see that people are still highly interested in what we're doing here tonight. Next item is the meeting minutes of September 25th, 2017. These were emailed to us earlier last week, right? Yes? Not prepared?
Make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from September 25th, 2017.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5-0. Very good. Believe that's almost it. If somebody watched this meeting tonight, you would see how many moving parts there are to what goes on in the planning department. The dates, these dates that creep up on us, we had covenants, we had site plans, all these concerns about dates that are going to expire, and the town planner, Elizabeth, have to continuously keep track of, reach out, and try to make sure that, all of the actions are done on time. It's a lot of work, and, I'm just very impressed with how well the planning department is doing in dealing with all these moving parts. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Jenks?
Is this the time then to ask for a raise?
Yes, my performance evaluation is tomorrow morning.
Karina and I will be here tomorrow at dark 30 and meeting with the Personnel Board, and hopefully that will go well, and
My 6-month review.
and Karina will do well in the raise department, I hope. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Mills?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? 5-0. Thank you.